Metaphor ReFantazio, a game that dives into the anxiety people face every day. While the game differs from Persona's themes, the personas in the Persona series generally represents a character's true self. Metaphor's archetypes represent the weakness that the characters have chosen to overcome. This is a world that I think that people can begin to sympathize and empathize with a lot of the characters and challenges that they face. The anxiety of the unknown, the anxiety of what the future holds. Also, a game that is now nominated for Game of the Year for 2024. It has a nomination for Best Game Direction, Best Art Direction, Best Narrative, Best Score and Music, and finally, Best Role-Playing. Metaphor ReFantazio was first announced under the codename Project ReFantazio in December of 2016, with no further information revealed until 2023, and was released for PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, PC, and Xbox Series X and S on October 11th, 2024. The term metaphor is defined as something that represents or symbolizes another thing. Now, the prefix re means back or again, and its meaning can vary depending on the word that follows. In the context of this game, Fantazio comes from Esperanto, which the game uses as in-universe language, and it means fantasy. The language used is a fictional language inspired by Esperanto. This is a constructed language developed by Polish ophthalmologist L.L. Zamenhof in 1887, and forgive me if I said his name wrong. His goal in creating Esperanto was to create a universal second language, simplifying international communication and ultimately unifying our world through a common tongue. This game was made by Atlus and Studio Zero. This is only the second game made by Studio Zero. Their first game was actually Catherine Full Body, but these creators have been around the block on Atlus games for a while now. In 2016, Project ReFantazio as a new IP for Atlus, affirming that the goal behind creating Studio Zero was to aim even higher, with original projects that could stand separately from either Shin Megami Tensei or the Persona franchise, though the development team's formation was previously stifled due to other people being committed to other projects at the time. Katsuro Hashino was selected to serve as creative producer and game director for the project after finishing Persona 5. Katsuro Hashino has actually been a part of the Shin Megami Tensei series and Persona projects since 1994. If you're familiar with my channel, you may recognize this interview from Yoko Taro himself. This interview was actually a plea with Atlus to not release this game. This interview, Yoko Taro is breaking down the world of RPGs and where all the different games align on his chart. He is talking about with the continuation of this Project ReFantazio, the Persona franchise and the NieR franchise are dead. He is begging them in this interview to please don't release this game. But also this interview takes place right before NieR Automata was about to be released. 7 years later, they asked Yoko Taro to play the demo and share his thoughts. And of course, the interview is a typical Yoko Taro interview, just a crazy old man. He picked up some Atlus employee off the street and taped his mouth shut and taped his hands to the controller. He also has to make it very clear that he has nothing to do with this game. He was an outsider asked to look at this game. Now, they did bring in a guest developer, Kota Kazuma, who is the concept artist for NieR Automata, as well as the game's overall art direction. And now that just gives fuel for Yoko Taro to give him a hard time for working on Metaphor. Katsuro Hashino, like Yoko Taro, does try to change the world with the games that they work on. Most people, when they think of Atlus games, they think of Shin Megami Tensei or the Persona series, but now with this new game, the goal is to make a third pillar. In an interview with the creators, when asked about what fantasy means, Hashino explains he found a definition that explains fantasy does more than immerse us in empty worlds of fiction. They exist because there's something about our world we want to change, and they help us reimagine something new. He also explains one of the themes for this game is facing your fears. He says humans have always grappled with fear as a fundamental part of our shared experience. Depending on the person, fear can either paralyze somebody or maybe even cause their decline, but it can also propel people forward at times too. It's very fundamental emotion we experience as humans, and depending on how we view it, it can push us to somewhere outside of our comfort zones, and that is the key concept this game is exploring. He talks about how they genuinely want people to feel something about their lives, maybe even feel encouraged or empowered playing through this game. In the same interview, we hear from the character artist Shigenori Soejima. He has spent many years working on the Persona series, series. He talks about how they basically had to start from the ground up on how to make a fantasy game. They looked at some fashion trends from the 60s and how they can make some of those styles work. And they even put the same thought process even with the background, making some of the backgrounds look like paintings. The composer for this game, Shoji Meguro, he is well known for the soundtracks for the Persona games. He's actually the only one so far that I've listed that has actually worked on Persona 3 Reload. When asked about the music for this game, he said the core concept of scoring is the music used in religion. His goal was a spiritual music style that also evokes a classical fantasy feel, and that was the idea that they went with for this game. With the spiritual music in mind, they've woven scores inspired by hymns as well as Buddhist prayers. Now, another designer they had brought on for this game is Ikuro Yamashita, one of the artists behind the beloved anime Neon Genesis Evangelion. He was the mecha designer in Evangelion, and in this game helped design the gauntlet runners. For the designs of the humans, they got inspiration from the famous Dutch painter named Hieronymus Bosch. I say influence, but it's more like a straight from his artwork, and funny enough, Yoko Taro called him out on this one too. To get into the mechanics of this game, we can start off with the dialogue of this game. Just like most Atlus games, you will be able to choose what to say during these dialogues. Depending on what you say can impact your overall experience of the game. And just like any other Atlus games, there are multiple endings. This time around, there are 3 bad endings and 1 true happy ending, but we'll get into that later. Your choices in what you say when trying to build up your bonds with your friends can also impact your friendship as well. Now, the thing with this game is a little bit different than like the Persona franchise. When building up your relationship in Persona, it's always best to have that Persona type with you to build that relationship. So for example, looking at An from Persona 5, she is the lover's arcana, so it's best to have a lover's persona attached to you when building these relationships. But in Metaphor, you do not need to worry about that. For the battle mechanics, the game is interesting in the fact that it mixes a sense of real-time action with turn-based. In this game, we're introduced to something called Phase Sight, and this is an ability that can sense the surrounding area for monsters. This can also be utilized to help you find some hidden passageways as well. But it is best used to show you how strong your opponent is that you're about to fight before you engage with the enemy. For the standard RPG turn-based battles, those are called squad battles in this game. What is interesting with the real-time mechanics is before you engage in a squad battle, you may actually attack the enemy first for a preemptive strike. When engaging in the squad battle against a stunned enemy, one of your party members will perform an advantage initial attack. Now, once you are in battle, it turns back into the standard RPG turn-based game. You have your melee attack to use with your sword, or you have your skill, which will consume some of your MP. But you will be able to use abilities like fire, ice, and even healing, etc., etc. There is also synthesis attacks that you have access to as well. This is basically doing a combo attack with a member of your party. Some of them do extreme damage, while some give huge boosts to your party as well. And these type of attacks take both teammates' MP. Another feature introduced to this game is called the turn icons. Those are shown at the top of the screen. When all turn icons are consumed, it will be the opponent's turn. Also, another new feature they added into this game is the storyteller difficulty. The couple of perks this mode adds is if you and your party dies, you can choose to revive instantly. Or if you're trying to escape the battle, you will always succeed. Now, you want to keep in mind the secret boss, which I will get into later on New Game Plus, you cannot do that fight on storyteller mode. Just like all the rest of the Atlus games, they still left the feature of attacking weak points. Certain enemies are weak to certain affinities. Just one of the new features in this game is hitting an opponent's weakness or hitting them with a critical attack. It will decrease the turn icon by half, essentially giving you more opportunities to attack. Now, we have to keep in mind though, that the enemy can utilize these same rules. In some situations, you can utilize this to defeat your enemy without giving them a turn to hit you. Another new feature, there is also the fact that you can arrange your party formation as well during a squad battle. The formation will affect the damage party members delivers and receives depending on the position. Those in the front row deal more damage with melee attacks. Those in the back row deal less damage with melee attacks. But the back row takes less damage from enemies. The game still does have the dungeon crawler aspect to it as well, and the real-time action is best utilized when exploring the wide variety of areas or dungeons these monsters hang out in. Now this is a feature that was kind of introduced in Persona 5. When utilizing Face Sight, you can see some of the monsters are different colors: blue, yellow, and red. Blue means the monsters are weaker than you, and you could take them out in real time without having to go into the squad battle and wasting MP. Yellow means that they are the same level as you, and you will still need to do a squad battle. And red means they are stronger than you. Now there is also the white color as well, but that simply means you have never fought that monster before, and this enemy is unknown to you. Also, a quick note here, the tools people use in this world are called igniters to help them use magic. They are used as weapons, and for the most part, nothing more. You can use these igniters to give you more magical abilities or boosts. But once you've awakened to your powers, you and your party do not need igniters to use magic, which is another thing that makes you unique in this world. There is still the social link aspect in this game as well. Just in this game, they call them followers. And also in this game, they simply refer to it as bond rankings. As you rank up in your followers' bonds, you will get different abilities to help you out throughout the game. Some characters will help you get discounts at some of the shops, or even raise the price of bounties for you. Now for this game, we do not utilize demons or personas in battle. In this game, they introduce beings called Archetypes that our protagonist and his friends awaken to. For the Archetypes, there are 14 lineages. When you start to include the higher classes, there are a total of 46 Archetypes. Each Archetype has their own set of unique traits and skills. And the nice feature with this is that the skills can be passed on to other archetypes. So for example, I maxed out the healer class and then passed on some of those skills to my offensive type archetypes as well to make a more well-rounded character. And it's also good to have at least 2 people with healing abilities. With this, you can really utilize all the different characters and abilities however you see fit. Also, talking to the people and discovering these bonds will awaken more archetypes for you to utilize as well. Now, another thing people will notice is that there is the calendar feature in this game. This is heavily utilized in the Persona franchise. You'll be able to choose what to do during the day and night, but you are limited on time, so the choices that you make during this time is important. Also, just like the Persona series, you have what is called royal virtues instead of social statuses, which contain the categories for courage, wisdom, tolerance, eloquence, and imagination. I have to give him a shout out because this was always a pet peeve of mine in the Persona series. They finally show you a quantity you can measure. There is a scale to show you how much you've learned and how much is left before you level up. In the past Persona games, you never knew where you were at. You're just playing these games at the arcade over and over and over again until it finally tells you that you've ranked up. Also, just like in Persona 4 Golden and 5 and 3 Reloaded, there is what they call traveler's voices, and you can see what other players have done that day if you want outside help on what to do during the day or night. Another feature they kept that was introduced in Persona 5, they have their own safe rooms. They call it the Magla room. Just like Persona 5, this gives you the opportunity to take a break and save your game and check to see how your party is doing. You can also utilize this to fast travel throughout the dungeons as well. Now, there is a lot more to get into on some of these game mechanics, but I'll talk about those throughout the story. This game takes place in the Kingdom of Uchronia. There were 3 countries that were united as one strong nation: Kingdom of Uchronia, Principality of Oceania, and finally, Principality of Monterio. The leaders of the national religion, which is known as Sanctum, pretty much rules this country. It also consists of 8 different tribes, which I'll get into these tribes throughout the video. This game opens up with what we see as the city's evening. We see someone handing a man a bag full of money, and you hear the man in white say, "God smiles upon the generous." And past them, we see the poor on the ground begging, and it is already showing a bad sign of the corruption and the poor suffering. Then we see this new character, a Griffith lookalike for this game. He is talking to whoever is in that bed, stating, "You dreamt of a utopia. You saw the tribes united as one." As the blonde Griffith says all this, he pulls out a knife, telling the man in the bed, "That dream died long ago, and you should have done the same." He then stabs this man in his bed. The blonde-haired man tells him, "Your kingdom will perish alongside you, by my hand." So basically, this man just killed the king. The next morning, people have surrounded the king's bed. They're trying to figure out the next steps, explaining that the prince is gone and there is no one to take the throne. We learn that the blonde-haired man's name is Luis. He explains that because the royal scepter could only work with the bloodline to the throne, it deterred any war. But with the royal family gone now, who is to take the throne? And then once you click new game, there is an interesting artwork of what looks like a modern day city. There is a person's voice we hear, and they talk to you as the player. They are labeled as Scheming Man. He asks, "Who are you?" And at this point you would input your name here. You will name the protagonist of this game later on. This man explains that the world you are about to take part in is a fantasy, but can it truly be dismissed as something so far removed from you? He raises a question to you. Is fantasy limited to the confines of imagination? Would you call it a powerless creation? And it gives you the option to answer. The choices are, that's right, or not always. No matter what you answer, he gives you the same answer of more than wishful thinking. More than fiction, something capable of affecting the realities beyond its bounds. He then later says, if fantasy is born from hope, a desire to make the world better than it is, then that hope can be made manifested. Thus does change come, and thus is fantasy forged into a new reality. This goes back to what the director spoke about with the meaning of fantasy. We now see our protagonist on his way to the capital, and we see his companion that is a fairy. They are attacked on the way to the capital by some Luis fanatics. These bandits are robbing the people, and they notice that the protagonist is what they call an Elda. They decide to try to steal his book, and a fight breaks out and the boy gets kicked off the ledge. When he comes to, your partner Gallica wakes you up, and she explains that you have a mission you have to complete. You have to cross the Tradia Desert to get to the capital. Gallica explains that they need to get to the royal capital and get our main character here enrolled as a guardsman at the army's recruitment center. And then they head to the capital. She does play a spell for him, and it's music that played directly into his mind. Gallica explains that music was the first magic this world ever knew. And I have to mention this, for once we get a protagonist that is talkative. In the Persona series, once you select what you want to say to the character, they just usually nod their heads or something. We don't actually hear any dialogue come from them. Once you make it to the capital, you see the city full of people of different tribes, but you also see the ugly side of the city as well. We see the gallows is set up surrounded by people who are just eating, drinking, and even people's homes and shops. And we see this man who is about to be hung begging for his life. But no one will listen to him. Then he is hung, and the crowd is just cheering it on. Gallica explains that there's no way the crowd was going to listen to anything a Parapus said. Parapus is known as a lesser tribe in this world. Looking around at the city, it is a very diverse city, but part of the problem is it is primarily the Clamar and the Resant tribes you see walking around. The Clamar tribe are the people with the sheep-like horns on their heads, and Resant tribes have the longer ears. We also get a little bit more of an explanation of what the mission is. Turns out the prince has been under a curse. Not even the kingdom's best saint can cure this curse that he is under. The prince has been under this curse for 12 years. Your mission is to infiltrate the military and deliver a message to the contact in there. Now, on the way to the recruitment center, you come across an igniter shop. The igniters are tools to cast magic. And then you meet the owner of this shop. Her name is Brigitte, and she is part of the Rogue tribe. One of the most distinctive features is the various markings on their faces. She gives you a lesson on what the royal scepter is, and wonders now, without a king, what will happen with its power. She also gives you a warning that with the state of things in the capital, to be careful. Once you get to the recruitment center, you overhear someone in front of you going through his interview. Whoever this guy is in front of you was once a noble. Once it is your turn for the interview, this is where you get to name the protagonist. Also, interesting fact about this part, when you're asked, what can you bring to our beloved core? Any skills to speak of? Depending on your answer here, you'll gain an extra skill point for that specific skill. The choice you make will either give you an increase in strength, magic, endurance, agility, or luck. And you could choose whichever one you want. Now, learning this game takes place in a European-ish world. I looked around my office and was trying to think of a name for my character, and I looked up and I saw my Code Geass poster. So I decided, why not? Let's go with Schneisel. And I, of course, now giggle every time I see his name. When you go to pick up your armor igniter from the desk, you start to become acquaintances with the nobleman who you overheard enlisting as well. You then get your first set of instructions from Captain Klinger. You and everyone else under his command are going to the fortress at the northern border, where you will be trained, as he says, into true guards. Turns turns out this is where the contact is that you need to find. Later that night, Gallica and you are talking about the discrimination that the world sees, especially towards him as he is part of the lesser tribe, as they call it. Gallica then points out that these are the same type of people who burned down his village, and then she explains that the prince took in your character after the village was burned down. Then we get our first look at the book your character will not let go of. It is what is known as a fantasy novel. In this world, there is only one tribe. All people accept each other, and no soul is born into discrimination. In such a world, there is no need for sorcery. A megapolis is built throughout learning and labor. Tower of glass that reaches the heavens. Safe nights with no dark shadows. Busy streets well traveled. And in the laws of these emotional satisfied people, it reads, all lives are equal. It's interesting seeing this fantasy world have art that shows more of the real world. We see a flashback of you with the prince when you were younger. The prince wants to be a true hero, one that will be a light in the darkness when he takes the throne. But sadly, we see the curse spread across his body. When they make it to the northern border fort, you talk more to the nobleman and he introduces himself. His name is Stroll. Stroll, if you couldn't tell at this point, he is a Clamar. While they were talking, a wounded soldier appears. The captain orders them to go up to the fort and fight these monsters that is attacking the soldiers. Gallica can sense something is off with what is going on. When they get to the fort, there is what they call a human attacking the soldiers. Stroll explains that that monster is called a human. You look around to try to help any survivors, but there are none. You are then attacked by a smaller human. Once you and Stroll have taken care of that smaller human, you make your way through the fort to try to find survivors. Stroll figures out that you and Gallica are looking for someone, but you continue to also look for any survivors. Before you go outside, you make it to the very top. You have a conversation with Stroll about how they will probably die trying to fight that human. But if there is even one survivor, Stroll has to try to save them. When you make it outside, you try to fight the human, but you are no match for it. Stroll tries to hold it off so you can make your escape. It looks like Stroll died so you could escape, but then all of a sudden you hear a voice, and you are taken into an area that doesn't look familiar. The voice is telling you, confront the threat before you, or die here, and he chooses to fight. The voice then says, heroism lie in the soul that stands firm against its fear. Then we see him begin to awaken to his power. He then reaches into his chest and rips out his heart, or at least what looks like a mechanical heart, and he awakens to his new power and takes on a new form, the power of the Seeker archetype. Now that you've awakened to this power, you can use the magic without an igniter, and you are able to defeat the human by finding its weakness. After the fight, you hear this voice of a woman explaining that he has awakened to the true spirit of a hero, and that this power lies dormant in all of us. The power to reforge the fear of the unknown into curiosity. She tells him that if he wants to change the world by his own hand, he should take that power and go forth to do so. And this time, Gallica also heard the voice as well. Stroll is alive, and finally Grius makes an appearance. Grius is the man you were looking for. Gallica gives Grius his new mission, avenge the king and kill Luis Guillaburn. You show Grius the prince's condition is not looking good. Luis is the one who casts the curse, so the only option is to take out the caster. Luis Guillaburn is a prodigal tactician and a master of Magla arts. They said that he was the caster that put the curse on the prince, but the son's death wasn't enough, so he went after the king next. He wants the throne. Luis left no evidence. People have tried to accuse him, but the allegations wouldn't stick. All they could do was send him far away as possible. To the soldiers and some of the common people, they didn't believe the charges. When they look at him, they see a capable veteran unjustly made into a noble scapegoat. Say what you will, everyone can admit he earned his titles. He's mastered the blade, magic, and is clearly intelligent. To the masses who want to change, they see him as the savior they need. Him and his army are currently the only force that is able to stop the humans from attacking as well. And it turns out Stroll was awake and wants in on this mission. Grius, of course, doesn't trust him. The goal is to get back to the royal capital for the funeral. Luis will be there for the funeral. You have to make it back to the capital, but you have to take a bit of a detour to avoid checkpoints. So they will go through the mines to get back to the capital. When you fall asleep, all of a sudden you wake up in a new place, where a man is sitting at his desk greets you. He introduces himself as Moore, and he is the author of the novel that you have been reading. He explains that you are in his study. He calls it academia. He explains that it is much of a prison as it is a library. The king saw fit to lock him in that place. He never thought he would be able to communicate with anyone, but for whatever strange forces are afoot, he can speak directly into your mind. He then asks for an alliance. He explains that what you can transform into are called archetypes, a spirit of heroic virtue, a transformative power that manifests only in those who embody the heroes and kings of old, at least in some core aspect. Archetypes represent the power of a true hero, one who can drive away calamity and evil in this world, no matter its form. More offers to provide knowledge and assistance to master your newfound power. And once you've taken his hand, this forms your first bond, and this bond will benefit the Seeker archetype that you have awoken to. But also he provides the ability to allow the party to change between archetypes once you've unlocked them in academia. As you can see, you have an outline or a tree that will grow as you create more bonds with people and unlock more power. When you wake up the next day, you begin your journey back to the capital. You have to cut through the forest and find an abandoned mine shaft in the mountain and take the tunnel to the other side. When you make it to the mine shaft, the army is there waiting for you and tries to take you out. There are also monsters in the mine shaft as well that you have to look out for. The army has labeled you as deserters and is ordered to kill you. Looks like you and your party have stepped into a conspiracy, so you'll have to fight your way through. You eventually find Captain Klinger in the mine. Turns out Klinger knew the human was there and sent those men to die. The reason he did that is because the kingdom's guard is powerless against the humans, and only a pile of bodies will prove that to the public. Stroll figured it out. Someone wants the king's guard disgraced, and when the people need him most, a savior rises as their shield. Klinger is one of Luis's men. Then Klinger talks about how this isn't the first time. Soldiers cry for reinforcements, the villagers plead to be spared, and then Stroll realizes he's talking about his home. Stroll then awakens to his power. He hears the same voice and is taken to the same place we saw the protagonist went to. He vows in the name of his people that died that day, he will strike Klinger down. Now, unlike the Persona games, this game automatically lets you take control of your party once they've awakened to their powers and join you. In the Persona games, I would always forget to change that setting to where I control the other characters. Once you've beaten Klinger, Stroll explains that he is from Halia. When it was attacked by a human, they sent for help but was denied help. He comes to his resolve. If Luis is the one responsible for that day, then he will answer for it. He asks to rejoin the cause now that he has his resolve, and then you form a bond with Stroll. Stroll has the archetype, the warrior. Then all of a sudden, Gallica and you are transported back into academia. Moore explains that the mortals suffer under the weight of our burdens, but in facing and embracing that anxiety, you make it your innermost power. You find freedom. And so the lives of those who overcome their hardships and embody the virtues within are passed down as heroic tales. During this conversation, you also create a bond with Gallica as well, and the mage archetype is born. By connecting with others who have found their resolve, you awaken a new strength. Just like I explained earlier, any of your allies can use the same archetypes and their abilities, and you are able to share this power with Grius as well. Moore is this version's Igor from Persona, or any of the characters in blue that work in the Velvet Room. Moore is only visible to you and Gallica. No one else is able to see his shadow throughout the different cities. The team notices Klinger has escaped, but there are no concerns since ultimately his mission failed. Now you continue onward fighting off the monsters and an optional dragon. You come across a magla crystal that is being guarded by a human. That crystal, according to the rumor, is a crystal that will drive anyone mad. After you defeat the human, you destroy the crystal and make your way out of the mine. As you make camp, you learn more about Stroll's family. He escaped with some of the other servants when the human attacked, and he waited for his parents that never came. His parents stayed behind to protect the villagers who couldn't flee. You also learn that the sword you carry was once the prince's sword. When he was bored of swordplay, he'd amuse himself by levitating it or standing on top of it to glide around, which you'll eventually be able to do yourself. Grius explains what happened 12 years ago when the prince was attacked. We then see a cutscene of Grius and one of the other knights protecting the prince. While they were fighting off the grunts, all of a sudden a mage comes in and curses the prince. We see the red-headed knight land a blow on the mage's back, but then the mage disappears. They could not lift the curse, it was too complex, and Luis would never give up the curse. So the only way to lift the curse, the caster must die. Stroll asks if he is sure that Luis is the man that they are after, and Grius says he saw Luis that night. He was younger but could never mistake him. The next day you head to the capital. Back in the capital, we see the red-headed knight. Her and the other king guard is also discussing about how things have changed. Everything is all politics now, and it seems like they've lost sight of who they should be protecting. Once you make it back to the capital, you head to the Hushed Honey Bee Inn to discuss the plans for Luis's assassination. On your way to the inn, you may notice that there is nothing but bodies lying around in the streets. Some of them are dead. They do not even bury the dead. They just leave them there to rot. There is a man sitting at one of the tables, and he explains that the people who have been hanged at the gallows, they are good, virtuous people, and that the true villains never face judgment, no matter their crimes. Even talking to the people around the gallows, they can't wait to see the next hanging, and it's a sad state of the world. Once you get to the inn, inn, you are greeted by the owner of the inn. Her name is Fabian, and a little girl who is Grius' daughter. Her name is Maria. Later, Grius explains that there is another member of the resistance, but no one can reveal themselves, but they get on with the plan. The plan is to kill Luis in the middle of the day in broad daylight, apparently. You and Stroll's job would be to create a distraction so Grius can go in and kill him. It's a crazy plan, but the only opportunity they will have. Later that night, Grius asks for you to go check on Maria. You spend time with Maria looking at your book. You learn that Maria helps out Miss Fabian with the inn, and she waits for her father whenever he goes out on missions. You both agree to do this again sometime, and then you form your next bond with Maria, and she has the archetype, the healer. You and Maria continue to read the novel. This chapter talks about society's purpose is to protect its citizens. This is a basic principle of this utopia. All are equal, all line in safety, and the rich and poor are as one, with no gaps, no conflict. All are friends, deserving of help. Basically, no one is left alone, and no one has a reason to fight. The next day, it is the day of the funeral. Grius promises Maria he will be back later tonight for dinner. When you head for the Grand Cathedral, you see more Shadow, and when you go to speak to him, he gives you missions. This is how you will build his bond, and his bond is pretty easy to do. As long as you're leveling up the archetypes and creating bonds with others, you'll be able to max out his bond rank. Moore believes this will also help him get his memories back, such as where is this place, and why is he confined to this place? During the events of the funeral, Luis makes his grand entrance, immediately making a scene with calling the king a fool and criticizing the government. Then he drops a human corpse in the center of everything and declares himself as the true and rightful ruler of the kingdom. But then there is a power that raises the palace into the sky, and then underneath the palace is the late king's face. Then we hear the face speak. It says he is the former king, and the people of his land desire a new king, and he shall provide. He declares that whoever earned the people's faith and trust by the day of the hero will ascend to the throne and become the king, basically making it now a democracy. We then see a spell that was cast amongst the people, so everyone can see who is the most desired to become king, and we see that it is Forden and Luis. Luis then gives his speech that under his rule, everyone will be equal and united. He will shield the people from the human menace, and together, peace is in their grasp. He declares those who follow him will have his protection, but those who refuse, he says, I will lead over your corpse. With that though, Stroll uses this opportunity and causes a scene in the crowd. So then Grius uses this opportunity to strike, but sadly, something stops him. He is held up by magical chains. The king's magic stopped him from killing Luis, and Luis slits his throat, killing Grius. The king declares no matter who you are, criminal, pauper, or noble, it doesn't matter based on stature or tribe. Whoever the people choose by Day of the Hero shall become the king. Also, by the way, Day of the Hero is October 31st. The king is basically introducing now a democracy. Those of low status who control the fates of those above them. This time, the elite do not hold all the power. Then we see Luis's ship start to fire at the cathedral, and the team goes to check on Grius to confirm he is dead. And then one of Luis's men appears and brings back the dead to fight you and any soldier around you. After you take him out, the red-headed knight introduces herself. Her name is Hulkenberg. Turns out this necromancer traps some innocent civilians into the cathedral, so Hulkenberg requests your help with getting the people out. Hulkenberg also thinks that the necromancer must be after the royal scepter. Naturally, like any other RPG, the path gets blocked off by some earthquake, so you have to find another way around to meet up with Hulkenberg. And of course, on the way, you save civilians here and there throughout the cathedral. Also, a little interesting thing about Luis's man, he is mixed with Mustari and Clamar, and we'll get into that more later in this video. And just like any other typical RPG game, the next entrance to the cathedral gets blocked off because they can't just let it be straightforward, so now you'll have to go another way. But first, Hulkenberg wants answers. She knew Grius as Arvid Alsis. She knew him as a tutor to the prince. She explains that she was a guard of the prince, but she has lost the prince. She asks, why did they try to assassinate Luis? Stroll gave a quick lie on revenge for the prince and the king. Hulkenberg doesn't really buy it. With that answer though, it was an answer she got and asks if you and Stroll can continue to help her get into the cathedral. Fabian finds you asking to help find Maria. They found Maria quickly and she was unconscious but not life-threatening. They gave Fabian the news about Grius and she takes Maria home. Hulkenberg tells you and Stroll that you can get into the cathedral through the mausoleum, and you make your way to the mausoleum. And like I said, can't be an RPG without making it the long way around to get to your destination. When you go through the mausoleum, you find another magla crystal, and it was a trap set up by the necromancer. and the enemy they have to face is Grius. Then the necromancer played a dirty trick using their friend against them. They naturally hesitate. Hulkenberg is asking why he tried to kill Luis. Grius is not a man that would take action based off of revenge, but Grius strikes Hulkenberg down. She asks, is this the price to pay for her failure? She asks, why did Grius abandon her with the prince? She looked for him for so many years. She was about to give up on her life, but before Grius gives her death, you jump in and save her, and tell her that the prince is alive. They explain to her that they want to lift the curse, and that is why they tried to kill him. Hulkenberg then awakens to her power. She chooses life of her own will. She once more takes up arms in her liege's name. Now that she is awakened to the archetype, the knight, you'll put Grius out of his misery. He leaves you a final message. He says the prince and Maria, he leaves them in your hands. Hulkenberg explains that she was one of the knights there that night when the prince was attacked. Due to Hulkenberg's injury though, they decided to retreat for now and take care of her wound. At this point as well, Hulkenberg is going to join you and Stroll on your mission to save the prince. And now you have another bond as well. Since the royal scepter is locked away by a magic barrier, it will take some time to break that seal. The game will tell you how long you have to complete a main story mission, and in this example you will have 10 days to complete it. So the next day you learn that you can ride the sword to travel throughout the city like the prince used to do, but also you now have the ability to pick up side quests from people throughout the city. And another feature they added into this game is that you have informants that will give you information on any quests or bounties that you have taken on. They will tell you about the enemy's weakness as well as information about the area. A quick little note about these side quests, they are pretty easy to work through. A lot of the times you will get bounties that just require you to kill monsters in different dungeons, or some of the side quests ask you to go pick up different items from different towns. And a lot of the time, since you have to cut through these towns to get to your destination, you can kill two birds with one stone. There are also some examples like Brigitte. She will give you a side quest, and once you've completed it, you will start the bond with her. Another little note about these side quests, some of them do have deadlines on when they need to be completed by, so you will need to keep that in mind. Continuing on using Brigitte as an example, to even start her side quest, you need to raise up your royal virtues. So in her case, you need to have the wisdom rank 2 to even start her story. So it is important to not only work on the bonds with your friends, but to build those royal virtues as well. This is pretty standard for Atlus games. You will need to manage your time wisely to get all this done. Once you decide to go back to the mausoleum, you find a Parapus woman. She appears to be injured and is trying to get into the mausoleum. She is looking for her friend, and the soldier that went in there after her friend hasn't come back, so you naturally offer to go find her friend. You eventually find Luis's men have taken some of the civilians as hostages, and once you have freed them, you find the Parapus's friend. She unfortunately did not make it. The Parapus woman catches up to you and she introduces herself. Her name is Katarina. She appreciates the help finding her friend and is a little thrown off that you offer just to help without even knowing who she is. This shows more of the discrimination that the Parapus deal with. But with this conversation, you now have forged a bond with Katarina as well. Now that you have forged a bond with her, you have unlocked the archetype, the Brawler. Now we continue onward to go find the mage and put a stop to him. Throughout this dungeon, we see how little Luis's men cares about the civilians. The necromancer uses the dead to attack you, but they are easy kills as long as you have a healer equipped to you to use light magic. And also, there are magla crystals that you have to destroy in order to proceed. Hulkenberg shares that the mage's name is Zorba. When you find Zorba, he shares that he is the one who set up these melancholia crystals along the path. He explains that all magic is derived from motes of magla, and what we saw was just one possible crystallization of it, one that drives mortals to madness. After he was done talking, he starts shooting pieces of bone at you, so now you have to come up with a plan to get past him. So now you have to find a shield to use to block the bones, and the plan is to use the painting of Luis as a shield, and that does the trick. Zorba is pissed. He took the time to drag this portrait up, and he will not destroy it, so now you're able to continue to go after him. Zorba did get to the royal scepter, and then headed to the roof. The problem is, once he is on the roof, the king takes back the scepter from Zorba and keeps it in the palace, but he plans on continuing of his plan of this day of calamity, whatever that is. You will then fight Zorba. In this fight, he will summon the dead to fight alongside him, but no biggie. Like I said previously, if you have a healer attached to light magic, it will take him out. After you beat him, he starts to explain a little bit of the struggle he went through. He points out that Stroll would never understand being a Clamar, but looking at you as an Elda tribe, he tries to get sympathy from you, seeing as how Elda tribe is also known as a lesser tribe, which is why Zorba followed Luis. Luis doesn't care about what tribe you are from. Zorba is a part of the Mustari, which I am jumping ahead, but it isn't a well-liked tribe amongst the people who worship Sanctism. But then Zorba releases a bunch of magla energy and then he falls off the building. Then all of a sudden you hear a roar. That human that Luis brought to the funeral is alive. That was Zorba's gift. Reanimation. Once you get outside, you have to fight that human. You and the team must stop this monster before it reaches the city. The challenge with this fight is you have to attack the body first to reach its heart. Once you knock down the big body, you can attack the heart. After you defeated the human, you and the team discuss on whether you could kill Luis with the magic that stopped Gria's. But it's time to head back to the inn to get some rest. When you get back to the inn, Fabian shares with you that Sanctus Church is going to have an announcement on the 22nd. Word on the street is that it will bring Luis out of hiding. We next see Sanctus Church's bigwigs are gathered to discuss what happened at the funeral. They brought a Ishkai woman named Rella to explain what the magic is. She explains that this magic is set up in place that the throne is not taken by force, but only by trust of the people. If those who have earned a certain amount of trust from the people, they are protected by the king's magic. Basically, the higher up you are in the ranking, you are protected. Rella does share one belief she has that could bypass the king's magic. A duel could be one way to stop the magic. They can be killed, but not murdered, which is an interesting difference here. Just like I said previously, now that we've completed the dungeon and defeated Zorba, you now have time to complete any of the side missions. And also, now that you're friends with Hulkenberg, you can go get bounties and start working on those. Or you can also work on bonds with your friends and build up your royal virtues. Some of these bounties and side quests will also help build up your royal virtues as well. As the 22nd comes, the announcement is that the church recognizes the rock in the sky and the magic is from the king. So the people can now choose who the king will be. When Hulkenberg and the others get together, she shares with everyone that they will not be able to kill Luis because of the king's magic. So they're at an impasse. But then Fabian comes into the room and Maria has gone missing and now you have to find her. Maria is at the cathedral. She goes there when she feels lonely. Maria was praying and no matter how much she prays, he doesn't come home. She is lonely now and wonders if it is her fault that everyone leaves her. They bring her back home and the team decides to rest and think about their next move tomorrow. That night, Stroll and you look at the book some more. The chapter they are reading is about this world's security. In this world, there is no blood-stained contest for sovereignty. The people choose their sovereign from among themselves. One cannot put a sovereign to the sword to seize power. Such an act would be met with scorn and judged as murder. Taking power or wealth by force is seen as the most shameful of transgressions. Stroll takes note that this seems to be maybe inspiration for the king's magic. The next day it is announced that they will be having a tournament for the throne. All of the contenders will set out on a grand tour across the 3 allied nations' capitals, taking part in a variety of trials. The first trial is called the Exhibition of the Brave. The contenders must slay a monster plaguing the people and bring it to Oceania's capital in time. The biggest find takes the win. Back in the inn, you and the rest of the team meet up to discuss what was in Grias's journal. It looks like Grias was also looking into the curse, so they need to look for the formula for this curse. They do not know where to begin looking for this curse formula, especially since they have no idea where Luis is. But then Hulkenberg shares the news about the tournament. This tournament is now state-sponsored to help Forden look like he's playing fair. If he wins the tournament, then it legitimizes him to the throne. You decide to take part in the tournament, and Stroll thinks that this is a great idea to try to get close to Luis. The goal is to get Luis's attention and even get recruited by Luis. So now that it has been decided that you are entering the tournament, the challenge is now they need to find a gauntlet runner. So Hulkenberg and the others split up. Stroll and you decide to go and register while Hulkenberg finds them a ride. Stroll and you go and look at the bounties that the guard can't handle. They find a bounty on a villainous kidnapper named Heisme. Then you get interrupted by this dude that has an outfit to match his hair. He shares with you that Heisme is an elite and an ex-royal knight. This guy explains that the tournament wants monsters and he's also pretty arrogant. Then another soldier comes up to them because he overhears them talking about the bounty on Heisme. This soldier says his name is Barden. He is the guard captain for Martira and he is the one who put up the bounty. Barden explains that on top of Heisme's past crimes, he is now abducting the children and selling them off. He points out that if the city becomes known for nightly disappearances, what sane person would stay? And he is concerned the impact this would have on the community and trade. Barden explains that the reason the guard can't handle him is because he is hiding where it is too dangerous for soldiers to go. It is deep in the territory of vicious giant worms. You agree to take the contract and will meet Barden in Martira, the old castle town. Later, Hulkenberg says that supposedly their ride will come to the opening ceremony ceremonies tomorrow. You also learn that Hulkenberg resigned from being a knight. She kept the title but is no longer in active duty. She was ashamed at what the Royal Knight has become. They now serve the Sanctifex instead of the Royals, and the church casted out any knights who refused to serve the church. This is another sign of the church growing in too much power and is abusing that power. Later that night, Hulkenberg and you talk about the book. She explains that she had heard utopian novels like this have been long since banned. Rumors say that the Sanctus objected to their contents. She wonders how could a simple book have stung them so, and you both read the chapter from that book. The chapter you're looking at seems to concern the system by which the nation's leader is decided. In this country, one cannot become even a statesman, much less sovereign, without the consent of the people. Those who aspire to statecraft must solemnly swear before the people what they will do to serve their country. Should they earn the title but break their word, they are denounced and stripped of power. Such is the authority of the people. In this way, it is the people who are the land's true king. Hulkenberg understands why the church would ban this book. I am curious, so far going through this story, what are all of your thoughts on this so far? We live in interesting times, and this game does do a good job of making people think about their lives, which was the director's goal with this game. Let me know in the comments what you think. The next day comes, and it's time for the opening ceremonies. We see a new character named Juna taking the stage, and she begins to sing. It was a beautiful song with the choir singing with her as well. Juna is from the NieR tribe. After she is done, it is explained that you will go to the west and head to the Principality of Oceania Harbor City capital, Port Brilehaven. There they will face the first challenge of bringing back the head of a monster. Then they will move on to the east and go to the Principality of Martira, Altabury Heights. Then they will go back to the royal capital, Grand Trad. Then they begin some introductions. After they introduce the members of the church, and people take notice that Luis is not there, but one of Luis's men is there taking part in the tournament. His name is Gledo. When it is your name called, you're not exactly met with cheers. Then all of a sudden they are interrupted by a land runner crashing into the cathedral. This is the gauntlet runner for your team. Not the most graceful entrances, but you made an impression, and now you're off to Martira. Also, now there is a meter with the king's face that shows you your ranking in this tournament. Now that you're in your gauntlet runner on your way to Martira, you meet your gauntlet driver. Hulkenberg introduces him. His name is NieR. He is a Ishkai, and what makes them stick out is the wings. He was the personal machinist to the royal family. In the flashback when Hulkenberg went to find NieR, she asks him for a custom-built gauntlet runner he was building for the prince. I liked his response to Hulkenberg when she asked if she could borrow it. Pish and tosh, woman. Turns out even when the prince went missing, he continued to build it, of course, with his own modifications. After a small conversation between the two of them, NieR figures out that the prince is still alive and agrees to help. To discuss some of the perks with the gauntlet runner, while you're traveling to your locations, there is things that you can do to raise your HP and MP as well as your royal virtues on here. You can use the bathroom to raise some of your stats. The shower is used to give you 100 XP. There is the pantry that you can access every day to get food. You'll have access to the kitchen to make meals with your friends. You'll be able to read books to raise your royal virtues. You can also raise your royal virtues by talking to your friends on the gauntlet runner, or work on raising your bond with them. You could even clean the gauntlet runner as well as find useful items while cleaning. When making camp as well on the gauntlet runner, you'll have access to the same things. On the way to your destination, you will sometimes make side stops to explore beautiful scenarios such as the Tree of Prophecy, and you'll learn the history of the world. NieR also draws a picture of these areas, and you can give these images to Maria. Sometimes there will be battles with monsters from time to time, or it will be with candidates that want to challenge you to a battle. On the way to Martira, you come across two candidates fighting amongst each other. One of them is Gledo, one of Luis's men. The other is Gledo, Fortin's right-hand man. They're trying to slow the other one down. You decide to help Gledo to try to earn favor with Luis. Gledo then decides to fight you, but because he's in third place, you can't attack him, so you have to attack his men. And to help out, NieR knocks over his runner. Gledo is suspicious of you, but Juna is with him and says not to take things so serious. Then after some small talk, Luis makes an appearance. Luis wants to know who are you, and what made you decide to enter the competition. You have to choose your words wisely here in order for the story to progress and to earn Luis's trust. So you tell him that you want to help him. Luis says if you want to be his ally, then you need to prove your power before all the kingdom's eyes. His logic is you can't change the world without power, but if we can prove that, then he will consider our proposal. Later that night, you talk to NieR, and he is struggling with getting a spark of inspiration inspiration. He talks about a civilization that apparently once lived the life of convenience and comfort. Automation had ruled the day, but that civilization just up and disappeared. He explains that he heard about this story from an old inventor in the town he grew up in. This old inventor showed Neris an item called the Lost Relic, and that used to give Neris inspiration for his work. This inventor has moved to a town called Comero, and whenever you get a chance to go there, you can go there and try to find this inventor. This is another example of you need to complete this mission to start your bond with Neris. We finally arrive at Martira, and it is time to see if this gambit pays off for you and your team. The town seems deserted and quiet. It seems like a lot of the people are hiding from something, and it makes sense since the people are being kidnapped. You find Barden and he greets you. He explains that this town is run by Lady Joanna. She is the holy sanctress of the Sanctus Church, and she lives in Kriegent Castle. Barden's officer, Morris, does not trust you and seems to be not on your side. Barden then fills you in on what has been happening. Children have been going missing now for 6 months. There are at least 15 children missing. Heisme is the current suspect. He is a disgraced knight with nowhere else to turn. They actually don't have any proof, but the pieces fit. The challenge is that his hideout is in the middle of Sandworm's territory. The team notices how far away his hideout is. Barden says he will schedule a meeting with Lady Joanna for tomorrow, so tonight the team can eat and rest. The next day you meet up with Lady Joanna. It is explained that the bounty she is paying out of her own pocket. She is not using the people's money for this bounty, so it seems she has the best interest in mind for her people. Lady Joanna offers that if we can get rid of the culprit, she will put her full support and the whole town's support behind you for the throne, which is shocking because she is a lady of the church. It is expected that she would give Forden her support, but she would rather have a king who truly cares for his subjects. After you have talked to her, you then need to go get information on how to get to the Sandworm's den. Sadly, there is no luck. No one is able to help with getting information. And then Morris comes and talks to you. He gives you information about how to get out there. There is what they call a sand flash, and it is when the weather picks up and the wind kicks up the sand, basically. They say one is about to happen in 5 days. When these sand flashes happen, the sandworms sleep it off, waiting for the storm to clear, which gives them a chance to sneak past. He didn't want to share this information in front of Barden because he would have gotten volunteered to go out there as your travel guide. He would rather avoid the danger. At least he's honest, I guess. Later that night, you talk to Neris to make sure that the runner can handle that journey. But then all of a sudden in the engine room, there is a flash of light. Even Neris doesn't know what this device is, but it was in the blueprints that the royal family gave him, and it works like an igniter, but he has no idea what it does. But whenever you go near it, it lights up. Later, Moore tells you more about it. It is a divine relic that has ancient power. It has the power of teleportation, and for convenient plot purposes, you are able to activate it. So the next morning you wake up and you're back in the capital. You must have teleported there. So they test it out, and it turns out that you could teleport to places that you have been to. And now in the game, we have fast travel. Now that you're back in Martira, you bump into someone and you were robbed. This stranger stole Grias's blade from you, and this gentleman who saw the whole thing noticed it and points it out to you. He will not assist you unless your imagination is level 2 and you convince him to help you. For him to help you, you have to find a ring for him. This man introduces himself as Cuculus. Naturally, another bond you can build, but you have to complete the mission for him. When it comes time to go hunt down Heisme on your way to the Sandstorm Den, you come across another gauntlet runner, and it is Katarina's gauntlet runner, and she wants to fight you. Turns out she is also running for the throne, and also beating her that actually raises your bond with her. And for a while, that is actually how you raise her bond with her. Whenever you run into her and fight her, your friendship grows. But as you continue on to the den, turns out the sandworms were not asleep. You hear movement, but then all of a sudden, it is not a sandworm that appears, but it is a human. You now have to fight it, and then all of a sudden it goes underground, and it does a surprise attacks and swallows you and your friends. This is turning into Kingdom Hearts when you're swallowed by Monstro. And just like Monstro, there is another person inside the belly of this monster. Another plot convenience to have someone explain to you how to travel through this human. So now you need to escape this human, and you only have 15 minutes to escape, and you have to escape from the back, if you catch my drift on what the back is. There are plenty of monsters inside this human to fight, and you have to be careful because some of the path will give you acid damage. When you make it to the exit, you have to make a run for it because nature is calling, which I'm 12 years old and I laughed. You successfully escaped and your pride is a little damaged, but now you're able to make it into the cave where Heisme is and continue on with the mission. When you get into the cave, you quickly find his hideout and you see his tent, and immediately Hulkenberg raises the question on if he truly is kidnapping children. How would he keep them here? There are also monsters everywhere, and 15 children missing? There is no way they are here. Then when you stop to get a closer look at the tent, Gallica hears something, and you're about to be attacked by a human, but someone stops it from attacking you. And after he fends off the human, you finally finally see Heisme. He is a Ujif. He explains he is another lesser tribe that the city people don't care for. He asks you, how do you know his name? Would it happen to be from the wanted posters? And Stroll admits that it is because of that. Stroll asks him, where are the children? And Heisme has no idea what you're talking about. He says there is no point in talking to someone who is after my head, and gets ready to fight. Hulkenberg says he is a part of the Shadow Guard. When you fight him, he does a shadow clone jutsu. Slightly kidding though, he actually calls it a mirage arts. And you can either take him out by getting lucky and guessing on which one is the real him, or using abilities that can attack multiple enemies at once. But even when you attack him, he's not attacking to kill you, and he does eventually make a run for it. After the fight, you start to investigate his hut and try to look for the kids. You come across an urn, and noticing by the size of it, it's a children's urn. Hulkenberg thinks that more than likely this is Heisme's son. As a fallen knight and someone marked as a criminal, he wouldn't be able to give a proper burial. You notice that his entire hut is covered in cloth. You realize that it is because of the sound. It is to dampen the noise. With ears like his, he must be more sensitive to sound. So Stroll comes up with the idea to get Heisme's attention. They just need to be as loud as possible. It works after some funny moments of them yelling at each other. Finally, Heisme drops in, literally. Hulkenberg explains that if the charges are false, she will hear Heisme out. She does not believe it because she realizes that he too has lost a child. Stroll does not believe him completely. He says anyone who can't face reality themselves is capable of any low, and Heisme keeps running away. Heisme doesn't disagree with him. Heisme will not go to the gallows though, not until he can put his son to rest. So he will fight if he has to, and now you fight him again. During the fight, he still doesn't hit you to kill you. After you beat him, Stroll asks him if he is the kidnapper, and Heisme points out, where would I keep them? He is just one man, and to kidnap on a scale that we're talking about would be impossible, so he's being framed. Stroll wonders why they put it on this innocent man, and Heisme points out that innocent is more generous than most of the world sees him. A Ujif drifter, a disgraced knight, condemned by the Sanctus. What couldn't they pin on him? He was a cast out, stripped of his titles, and put a price on his head. They wouldn't even let him mourn his child. Hulkenberg points out that Heisme never intended to kill them, and Heisme tries to play it off like, no, I just didn't want to clean up the mess. You all come to the same conclusion that he isn't the kidnapper, and wonder what is going on. They wonder who is the one who is playing them, the Sanctress or the guard. Stroll points out that they were attacked by something they were told would be asleep, so it seems like the guard corps set them up, but they need to further investigate, and they bring Heisme back with them. So you and the team decide that you will need to find the actual culprit to bring their head instead for the competition. They will contact Barden tomorrow, but keep Heisme a secret for now. They don't know who to trust. Stroll and Nurse will keep an eye on Heisme that night, and then you and Hulkenberg will go back to town to rest in the inn. The next morning, Hulkenberg lets you know that Barden sent word that some children went missing overnight. So you go to the Gauntlet Runner to check if Heisme is still there, and you find Nurse reeks of alcohol. Heisme is nowhere to be found, but when Hulkenberg goes to get water to splash on Nurse, we hear a scream. Heisme is in there, and Nurse admits that Heisme kept scaring him, so Nurse locked him in the bathroom. Heisme explains that he heard footsteps last night, but none that he recognized. He says if this can prove anything about his innocence, that is why he spoke up. And that is what scared Nurse and made him lock him in the bathroom. Stroll comes in and says he doesn't think Heisme is lying. Stroll couldn't find anything but one of the children's shoes. Stroll checked with the guardsmen and no one has left the town. That means the culprit is still there in town. You and the team decide to go talk to Barden and talk to him about everything you know. Morris is there as well. Stroll asks a question. Why was Jaime the only suspect in this case? Morris says on the night of the kidnappings, he spotted a Ujif bolting into the wilderness several times. Morris says, what are the chances that there are two Ujifs in the area? Barden even becomes suspicious. This information was not on the bounty when they accepted it. Hulkenberg shares that Heisme was in their custody yesterday, so the kidnappings from last night can't be his doing. They also confirm about the guards saying that no one came in or out of the city. Morris is now beginning to panic. Then Lady Joanna comes out of her office, and then Heisme hears something. He says, now I see your games, you fiends, and then disappears. The guards begin to search for him. Now, obviously, Heisme could have escaped at any time, but he stayed on the runner, so they are still convinced him and even Barden are innocent. Stroll thinks it is Morris that is to blame. They go back and check on Nurse and ask what happened last night. Nurse says that last night after he locked Heisme in the bathroom, through the fog he saw a massive shadow. He says it wasn't any beast or man of this world, and that is why he got drunk. He needed a drink after seeing that. When they go back to the castle to look for Heisme, Barden gets your attention and he is with Heisme. Barden wants to learn the truth. Heisme explains when Lady Joanna opened her door, he heard a child scream. Barden confirms that Lady Joanna is childless. Morris, and whatever Heisme heard can't be her family. Heisme confirms that no child could get into such a heavily guarded castle unnoticed, and that the kidnapper has to be within these walls. Stroll places his bet on Morris being the one. Heisme asks for your help to catch the kidnapper. He doesn't want to see any more children get hurt. Barton explains that there is a hidden passageway to get into the castle, so you go and meet him in Blind Well Alley. You get to the underground tunnel through the well, and you make it underneath the castle as you find Morris with the kidnapped children. The place starts to shake, and Heisme says those are the same footsteps from the night. Hulkenberg asks why does he do this, and Morris admits it's for the money. Morris calls out Heisme because Heisme is an exiled knight who ran, and Heisme admits it's true. He ran from his past and turned away from the pain, but he cannot sit back while these children are being kidnapped. And this is now when we see Heisme wake up to his power. He realizes he can't erase the past. All you can do is take it in the hand and reshape your future. And now he awakens to the archetype, the thief. After you fight the dogs that Morris sends after you, Morris made his escape and you've saved the children. Heisme shares that his son was killed. He felt the shame of not being able to protect his own flesh and blood. Who could call him a knight? He struggled to find what he had left to live for after that. It seems like the melancholia is what may be causing these beasts to evolve down here. Hulkenberg raises the question on who would finance these atrocities. You return the children to Barton. Barton informs you that Morris has been struggling to pay off gambling debts. He wants to get the guard and go hunt for him, but Hulkenberg objects to that. She says the guard would be no match, but they can make sure that no one leaves these grounds. There are also possibilities that Lady Joanna is a part of this, and currently she has gone missing. Also, Heisme joins your party now as well. Later that night, you go to the Gauntlet Runner to get some fresh air, and you spend some time with Heisme. He asks what our group's real goals are, but you can't share that with him just yet. But that is okay, Heisme understands. He gives you a little backstory about his tribe. The Ujifs have never been accepted by others. They are nocturnal, and they look so very different from the rest, and there are so few of them, and no political sway. The elders of the tribe only think of short-term alliances, and relied on others' powers. Heisme, even as a child, hated that. Even as a child, he never once considered himself lesser, which to me showed me the strength of his heart and will. He worked hard, honed his skills so others may accept him, and one day he was accepted in the knighthood of the royal capital. They kept him in the Shadow Guard though, where his work was dirtier and kept secret, equal and lesser in the same breath. When his son died, he failed to protect him, and despite everything, he resigned himself to being powerless, just like the elders he hated so much. You and everyone else helped him realize though, he thought he needed power to feel accepted. He wasn't really looking to swear himself to some superior. He wanted to be accepted for who and what he is. He just wanted friends, and you have now become friends, and now you formed a bond with Heisme. Then you take a look at the book. This section describes the approach to discrimination. In this world, discrimination and inequality are forbidden by law. It is sin to impose injustice due to one's appearance, lineage, or birth. This is the accord established between the people and the state. Even Heisme says you cannot pretend at diversity without acknowledging individual differences. Some will be judged as strong, while others marked as weak. Equal competition doesn't mean equal footing. Their very aims of freedom and balance could spell doom for the weak. Heisme swears with this new power that he's awakened to, he will always use it to save the weak. You now have 12 days to apprehend the real kidnapper. You need to be in Brilehaven at that time. It's yet again time to catch up on some side quests that you have. Like for example, you have the quest for NieR, going to that city Komuro and finding the other inventor. But you find out that he passed away. But the townspeople give you some of his belongings and a glass ornament. You have no idea what it is, but you give it to NieR. He tells you that it is a lost relic. You also hand him a notebook that belonged to the old inventor. It contains the research for more lost relics, but he's unable to find any more. So NieR asks if you can look around for some of these relics. You agree to find them, and this is how you start your bond with NieR, and you unlock the archetype, the gunner. Gallica is also able to help find these relics. When you go to dungeons, she'll be able to sense them. So as long as you travel and complete the dungeons, you'll be able to find and complete NieR's bond as well. Now, since you're also trying to earn people's trust and gain more attention from the people, you can actually find other candidates on stage and you're able to debate them. There are some candidates that just have silly ideas. For example, Loveless here just wants to give everyone free alcohol. Now, depending on your answer, you can lose or win the debate, so you'll have to choose your answer wisely. And with these debates, when you win, you gain more eloquence and imagination. Now, when you decide to continue to search under the castle to find Morris, you notice there is a monster roaming around the area. All you see is its shadow. Heisme says that has to be the monster from the other night. This dungeon is pretty short. The biggest challenge in this dungeon is that you need to avoid the giant shadow at certain points. You can fight the shadow, but it's a waste of time, and you'd better save your MP for the actual boss fight. fight. You continue to find Morris, but he keeps running away and you have to hide from this monster. You finally catch up to him and he is with Lady Joanna, but it's a classic trapdoor underneath you and your friends fall. You wake up in a cell. You do hear a familiar voice when you come to, and it's Captain Klinger. Morris uses Captain Klinger to defeat the monster. Good thing is you have a fairy as a friend and she's able to set you free from the cage. Then you're able to go free the others. There is a small challenge where every time you free your friends, you free monsters as well and you have to fight them, but it's no real challenge. After you free everyone, you continue on with the mission. You come across a room and it appears to have stuff for a child, but Joanna was childless. There is also a giant portrait of Lady Joanna, but it appears to be damaged. It is common for noble to have a portrait painted in celebration of a child's birth, but there is no child or a husband. There is a journal on the ground. It belongs to the nurse who helped take care of Joanna's son. Joanna was unmarried. She never married the father of her child. It was a love child, at least for the people of Martira. The father was a foreigner of another tribe. Their marriage would never have been accepted. The traditionalists always said mixed blood children are abominations, terrible omens, and superstitions like that tend to carry a lot more weight in the countryside. Now, if you think back to Zorba, he was also mixed blood, so you can imagine he had to deal with a lot of his own hardships. But anyway, for Joanna, she brushed it off, saying it was ridiculous and irrational. She was about to announce the child's birth, but then tragedy struck. The nanny they hired, she killed the boy in his crib. Joanna's family was overjoyed. The deed kept the abomination out of the public's eye. They never even investigated her crime, and the father was banished from the city. When you look around, it isn't looking good. There is a diary about feeding the baby, and then you see a giant crib that is broken. When you go into the next room, it is time to see the truth. You find Lady Joanna and Morris, and you hear a baby, till it screams, and it is definitely not a baby, and you see it. It is a human. This is the child that Joanna holds dear. Joanna says that her baby has a hearty appetite, and Morris delivers them food. Joanna is not happy that you and Heisme are there, so she feeds her baby Morris. Stroll questions what is happening, and when he calls that thing a monster, Joanna does not like that. Joanna says the monsters is what she sees when she looks out in the world. People are beasts of fear and superstition, murderers without remorse. She is twisted. She says all those people should be glad to nourish her child. Heisme admits he does feel, I think, a bit of empathy for her. He knows this woman's pain all too well. Burying your own child is unbearable. Grief and madness fill the gaps where love had been. But the difference is now, you and everyone else helped Heisme see. The only way to beat the darkness is to confront it. Heisme urges Joanna to walk back to our reality. He tells her to look upon that beast. It is not the child she once loved. It is time to fight this child now. It's time to put an end to this horror this town deals with. After a while of fighting, Joanna does use her magic to heal the monster, and you will need to take its eyes out so it can't see you, giving you an advantage. Once you defeated it, Heisme admits he too could not protect his child. It was in a nearby village. Some parapists started a riot, and his son was caught in the middle of it. They beat him until he was barely recognizable. Even bloodied and battered, he clung to life, but his body was broken. He couldn't move, and no one came to his aid. He was a Ujif, and to them, that is all he was. He was a helpless child, left to die in a pool of his own blood. By the time Heisme got to him, it had been hours, and it was too late. That is when he ran. He spent his nights and days in the sandworm pit. Reality was too painful. He lived in the den of beasts because he thought death would be a mercy. Then you came along and dragged him out. Heisme realizes this is not the life his son would have wanted. His memories deserve love, not pain, and Heisme is able to get through to Joanna. She breaks down and says if she could sacrifice her life instead, she would have. She loved her son with all her heart. I will admit, I did start crying in this moment. It's always the worst hearing about innocent children dying for some terrible reason by other adults. This also shows the power of grief and trauma and the different paths it can lead people. They are now trying to figure out what their next steps are. Do they bring in the human? More than likely, that wouldn't work. But then Joanna reminds them of the promise she made when they first met. She pledged her political support to you if you solve this matter. She doesn't think she can no longer provide that, but if you need a head to present to the judges, she will give you hers. She will confess the truth before the masses. The evidence will be undeniable if it is said from her own lips. As a holy woman, she would risk dire consequences, possibly without a trial. She wants to first make sure that her duties are passed on to her successor. She asks that her and Barton join you later on at Brilehaven. She will atone for her sins for her son's sake. Heisme points out that the people have suffered enough unrest. She must ensure that they still have guidance, or else they'll fall into chaos and panic. So you have to decide on the next steps. I choose to trust Joanna. And with that, you've caught the real kidnapper. Barton confirms that he heard the truth from Lady Joanna and will make sure that the bounty on Heisme is taken down, but you will be paid in full. But instead of taking the money, Heisme Jaime asks that we donate a portion of the money to the families, and you can make the choice to donate all of the money to the victims. Hulkenberg asks Jaime to join you, and you tell Jaime the truth of your mission. He agrees to join you. Now, since I had more time to kill before heading to Brilehaven, I took this opportunity now to complete that task for Cuculus, who would help me get Grius' memento back. I went and got the ring he wanted, and he asked that we stay hidden and let Cuculus do all the talking. Cuculus is lying to this man about his father being sick, and he has the medicine that his father needs to get better, but it will come at a price, and that price is the dagger he stole from you. Cuculus gets the dagger back and gives it to you. Cuculus offers to help you on your quests for the throne. He will offer his winning strategy to you. Cuculus says to become king, you'll need someone versed in darker, grayer areas. Someone like me. In return, he just wants information on the places that you've been to. He tells you his true name is Alonso. Anyone calling him Cuculus is one of his marks. He gives you the advice that kindness is weakness, and the weak get robbed blind. He wants to help teach you the art of deception, but rather how to steal hearts the morally sound way. And you agree, and now you formed a bond with Alonso. This introduces you to the archetype, the Faker. It's now time to depart to Brilehaven. Brilehaven is the capital of Principality of Ocean, the western annexed state of Uchronia, also known as the City of Water. When you arrive, Nereus offers to stay on the Gauntlet Runner, while the others go find an inn. When you walk around, you noticed, sadly, the state of this capital is familiar to the Grand Trad. There are corpses of people lying throughout the city, a sad sight to see, and the people just walk by them ignoring it. When you start to look for an inn, you see the king's head floating in the sky above. He is keeping a watchful eye on the top candidates, it seems. But going back to searching for an inn, sadly all the inns aren't available. Everyone and their mother showed up to watch the exhibition. You managed to find a not so pleasant place to stay though. You and everyone else discuss what is next. You're waiting for Joanna to show up. Jaime offers his head still if Joanna doesn't show up. The next day you go to check on Nereus, and he is drunk. And Baron and Joanna are nowhere to be found. But when Hulkenberg goes to use the washroom, surprise, Baron was in there. And then we see Lady Joanna as well. Nereus got drunk after hearing Joanna's story. After a bit of talking, Stroll admits that he is hesitant to turn in Joanna because she's genuinely decided to repent, which I don't blame him. This situation makes you question on what is right and wrong. Tomorrow is the big day. They announce that the candidates within the top 20 ranking will move on to the next round. They begin with showing off the heads of the monsters everyone brought. We see Glodell brings in a monster's head, and it is the monster's head of a human, but you can't really tell what it is, especially if you're the average person. The people question if it's a human or something he made himself. Then Forden brings in his monster. Not sure how they got that thing in the Coliseum, but whatever. Forden claims it is the monster from the east that has been causing the problems for the people in Brilehaven. Finally, it's your turn, and you and Lady Joanna walk up to the front, and Lady Joanna confirms the head they offer is hers. Glodell, of course, tries to jump in and points out that Jaime is the criminal that they were originally supposed to be chasing. Lady Joanna confesses her crimes to everyone. She admits that she kept the human in her basement, and she would feed her people to the monster, and she says that Jaime is innocent. She framed him. Forden confirms that everything she says is true, and Forden decides to execute her right then and there. Joanna stops you from interrupting. She's grateful for the chance to confess. She asks that you lead the country armed with the truth, and you promise. Forden may have brought the biggest head, but you brought the heaviest. Luis makes an appearance after the exhibit, and his two men introduce themselves. The shorter one is Fidelio, and the other one is Basilio. Luis basically appreciates the fact that you were able to rub the face of the church in the dirt. As Luis leaves, Juna comes back to let you know there is a messenger to fetch you later, and then she admits that she will keep an eye on you. Later, when you talk to your team, you figure that he must be keeping the formula on the gauntlet, so for now you wait for the messenger. Later on, we see Forden and the rest of the bigwigs having a meeting. Forden is pissed about Lady Joanna. She ruined his moment to shine. Forden is even more pissed that it was an Elda candidate who brought Joanna. He says, will that benighted tribe never stop dogging my heels? Damn, dude, the discrimination is disgusting. It gets worse in this conversation. Godot gives a suggestion that the next challenge should be hunting for the divine relics. Forden says that they are false idols the pagans consider relics of their god. Godot then says, what need does the world have for gods beyond ours? Which shows how much they do not care for others practicing other forms of religion. Forden wants to tell the people after he has won the throne that these relics were originally relics that belonged to the Sanctus Church, and that they were stolen over time, which if you couldn't tell from this conversation isn't true, showing how corrupt this church is and how low they will go to maintain power. They decide to have this challenge presented on Saints Day. The next day you get a message from Luis, and you are to meet at a bar called Night Prowler, and Fidelio and Basilio are the ones that will greet you. They ask you a question. What kind of king are you selling yourself to be exactly? He wants to hear your pitch. When it comes to to questions like this, I always pick the answers that are not necessarily lies. Obviously, I'm trying to win favors from Luis though, but I had my character never lie. The next question is, why do you want to serve Luis? And I gave the answer of, I do not like Forden or his church, which isn't a lie either. You are then welcomed onto Luis's gauntlet, the Caradrius, which, fun fact, is the name of a bird. While you go talk to Luis, the plan is that Gallica will go and investigate and try to find the formula. You board Luis's gauntlet runner. You learn that there is a security device by the elevator, so not anyone can just use the elevator to travel as they see fit. You need a key to use the elevator, and only certain keys will allow you to get to certain areas. You come across one of Luis's men named Xanth, and he's not exactly a fan of yours. And then you get up to the reception room, and Luis is waiting for you inside. Luis allows you to ask anything you would like to know. I kept the question something that I felt like wouldn't push things too far, so I asked him simply, what are his plans against Forden? Luis admits bluntly that he will kill Forden, and it's not like his victory rests on that. No, he thinks that Forden and the church are tumors on this country's flesh, and he wants to get rid of them to save this country. Luis allows you to join his service, and then Basilio comes up to you and wants you to prove your loyalty by cutting your finger and letting the blood pour into the heart. Fidelio says to be careful because if you aren't true to the cause, you may lose a limb, and you hesitate. Luis says fear and anxiety, they always lead the people astray, but power and order trumps all. You cut your finger and Fidelio admits that it was a joke, but then Luis says that on August 13th there will be a soiree in the city, and that it would be a good opportunity to introduce you all. Meanwhile, Gallica is looking around. She cuts through the ventilation shaft. Juna comes up by the elevator and sends the guards away. She's holding some documents and goes into Luis's personal quarters. Gallica thinks it is the formula. She gets back to your gauntlet runner and lets you know that she may have found the formula and where the formula is hidden, and it is in Luis's quarters. But to get to his quarters, you need to go through the crew quarters, then the starboard corridor or the port corridor, and naturally, you need a key to get into either one of those divisions. And then Luis's quarters, you need to get a special key to get in there, and that key is on the bridge. Stroll throws the idea that they can infiltrate the night of the soiree. There'd be less people working. Stroll thinks that the best person to sneak off to go get the formula is you. Luis is bound to notice if anyone goes missing, so Stroll's idea is to send the best of our team out there. As there is time to kill before the soiree, I took this opportunity to go make a bond with Barden. Barden wants to talk to you about how you and your friends are all of different tribes get along, and it is because we share the same common goal. Barden says what they need in Martira is a leader everyone acknowledges. We need a new system where people themselves govern the town, and asks for your continued support. With this bond, you earn the archetype Commander. When we infiltrate Luis's gauntlet runner to get the keys, it introduces us to more stealth gameplay. I thought this part was silly because logically it would make more sense for Heisme to sneak around to get the keys, but for plot purposes and gameplay, they want you to do it. When it is time to sneak around to find the keys, the game turns into a top-down game. You're sneaking around the place, knocking out the soldiers to get to each room where the keys are. The first room you have to sneak through is the crew quarters. You cannot proceed to the room where the key is until you knock out all the soldiers. Then once you've done that, the gang will meet up with you and you will fight Xanth. You must beat him within 3 turns before he calls for backup. After you beat him, Xanth's pride is hurt and he hands over the keys, and he will keep quiet about it because he doesn't want to admit to everyone that he lost to you. Then the next path I took was the port corridor, and this time Hulkenberg joins you to sneak around to knock out the guards. After you and Hulkenberg take them out, you will go and fight Glaucome for his key. He is drunk and it seems like you can almost talk your way out of it, but then you still have to fight him. Just like Xanth, you still have to beat him within 3 turns. Once you have beaten him, it's time to move on to the bridge. You sneak your way onto the bridge, but there are too many guards, so the team helps create distractions and gets everyone off the bridge. Then you go and talk to Cabillo. Turns out he's a huge fan of Juna's. You almost distract him enough to steal the key without him knowing it, but then another officer named Salva appears on the bridge and you have to fight both of these guys now. And after you knock him out, you take the key and make your escape. For Luis's soiree, he quickly gets the introductions out of the way. He introduces you to everyone. After he does that, it is time for you to sneak off. Since there aren't as many soldiers, you're able to get onto the Caradrius with ease. The problem is they added extra security, and it also sounds like the bridge is locked. Back at the soiree, Stroll goes and talks to Luis. Stroll asks Luis if he was the one who gave the order not to send reinforcements to Stroll's home when it was attacked by a human, and Luis confirms that it is true. He says it was to save this country. He says the full king and the fossils of the Sanctus Church refuse to see the threat looming this country, so Luis thought a dramatic demonstration of the human's destructive power was needed. He even talks about how you could see the fire as far as the palace battlements, and because of that, the old men couldn't deny the human threat any longer. Stroll points out that hundreds of lives were lost, and Luis points out that Stroll all must realize that you cannot protect anything without power. Luis points out that the few have the luxury of living without the need to struggle and harm just to survive. But the current state of the nation would have people believe such hardship is born of moral weakness. So the punished are punished further. They die in silence like livestock. He says it defies reason. All people deserve a chance to fight for their lives, with their lives. Some will fall, some will triumph, and therein is true equality forged, however cruel. He then says that all of Stroll's people and his sacrifice will not be in vain. That logic is not equality. The weak will continue to suffer with that logic. Glidell notices that you are missing and decides to go look for you. Back on Luis's runner, all of a sudden the gauntlet runner starts to take off. You go outside and all of a sudden the ship begins to tilt. It is now on its side. You get sent flying because of the wind. You're now at the front of the ship and you have to now get back to where you were to sneak into Luis's quarters. Now you get to fly across the ship by riding your sword and jumping across the wings. You make it back to Luis's quarters and you're able to sneak in through the side door into his quarters. You try to look around but no luck. You even try to look in his closet but no luck. On his bookshelf you notice that he has the same forbidden text as you're reading. Behind that book in the bookcase there is a hidden box with a bunch of magic formulas and you decide to take the whole box. But then all of a sudden Juna appears from Luis's closet and you try to bullshit your way through, but she's not buying it. She asks that you keep what she is doing a secret and she will do the same for you. Gallica tells Juna her name and Juna is shocked by the name. Glidell shows up outside Luis's room. He knows somehow that Juna and you are in the room. Juna confirms that the box that we're looking at has the formula to the curse. And Gallica asks, "Who are you?" And Juna says, "Let's survive for now, talk later." Back at the soiree, Luis announces that he officially will be entering the tournament for the throne. People question if he is allowed to enter late, and Forden would not approve. And Luis points out he doesn't need the church's approval. The king's magic says the throne goes to the people's chosen king, which isn't wrong. Luis doesn't need to enter at all, realistically. But this tournament right now has all the people's attention, so he has to at some point make an appearance. He also says that there is a rat amongst his men, and he has the brothers go find the rats. The brothers notice that the Caradrius has taken off, but the ship comes back down and they go to investigate. You have to make a choice now to either go help Juna or make a run for it. You go to help her and you see Glidell has a sword to her neck. He is pissed. You keep embarrassing him and he won't have it anymore. He admits that he wants to be king. He will defeat Luis as well. You are unable to attack because Glidell is protected by the king's magic. Juna knows how to push his buttons and is able to trick him into letting her go. Granted, he slaps her, but it still worked out in her favor. You run in to stop Glidell from attacking her, and Gallica and Juna realize that the king's magic isn't protecting him. Juna really proves it by slapping him, and then she wants to fight with you, and she awakens to her power. She knows about the archetype power. Her archetype is the masked dancer. Now you and Juna must fight Glidell and his dog. Juna's archetype is interesting. She explains it. She's able to change her mask to give her different powers. So for her, you can equip different masks of other archetypes to give her other abilities, such as mage or even like a healer. After you defeat Glidell, he is on the ground begging to be spared. He says he will not say a word about us sneaking in. We just need to spare his life. And of course, it's a trap and he goes in to attack you, but the king's magic stops him and the king's magic kills him. Then the Magnus brothers find you and Juna. The brothers ask Juna for the truth about what happened. Juna is bullshitting her way through this conversation, putting the blame on Glidell. Juna admits that she wanted to take the Gauntlet Runner up for a trip and got carried away. Fidelio doesn't believe it. Basilio says that would mean Glidell would have been the rat. Juna is also good at making things awkward for people to get them to drop the subject, which is basically her sharing way too much information than anybody else wants. Later, you tell Luis the same story. Luis confirms that you are now higher ranking and your face now appears on the rock, so their story could be true. Luis tells you that from now on, you're his eyes and ears, and we shall now just wait and see what Forden has planned. Until then, we are free to go. But then Juna asks if you can be her new chauffeur. Luis said, let her do as she pleases, but Fidelio still doesn't buy your story. Later on the Gauntlet Runner, Juna makes an appearance. Turns out Juna is the other agent Grius mentioned. Juna never actually knew that Grius was the other agent, but she shares her objective. The curse on the prince can't be lifted by conventional methods, so we either kill the caster or get the formula. She said if she never learned that the fairy messenger's name was Gallica, she would never have realized it was you. You now have a new ally as well. She agrees to stay close to Luis in the meantime. So now it is a matter of finding someone who can break the formula. No one currently can understand what this formula is. Stroll says that Grius' journal states Arella in there. Maybe he was thinking about taking it to her. When the prince was attacked, they sent for Rella at the time to help heal him. She was only 12 years old old at the time. Juna explains that she is the prodigal talent, one of the most gifted students at the Mage Academy. She was better than all the teachers. Sadly though, she's at the royal capital. They explain to Juna that they can get there instantly and go to the capital. Rella is working at the church. In normal circumstances, people with Rella's talent would only work for the royals, but she helps the common folk as well, which is understandable on her saintly title. When you get to the church, Juna explains that Rella is her older sister, and no one really knows. They keep it on the down low because they don't know who would try to hurt either one of them. You show her the curse, and when she looks over it, she says that this curse is basically an invert of a healing spell. You also explain to her that the prince is dead, and this curse was the one that killed him, and that is why you're trying to get Luis so you can make him pay. She explains that this curse is enduring. It is designed to perpetually draw on magic of the caster. She explains if the prince still lived, she doesn't think anyone could break the curse using this. She says it isn't complete, it's a mere outline. She could tell someone wrote this from memory. At the moment, it seems like there is nothing that we can do to break the curse, but for now, you just keep going. You will wait for the announcement for the next challenge. Later that night, Juna and you look at the next chapter in that novel. She's familiar with it because she's seen Luis read it as well. The next chapter says, the prevailing culture of the world is of freedom in all things. No faith, fealty, or philosophy enforces ideology. All are free to create and all are free to embrace those creations. This culture's influence spreads throughout the world. It even said that a song of peace was powerful enough to bring an end to the war. For Juna, this resonated with her. She wonders if song really could reach all of people's hearts, no matter their status or tribe. The next day, we see all the candidates then move on to the next round, and the next challenge is announced. It is to recover and offer divine relics. The Mustari candidate seems to be most shocked by it. Juna finishes the announcement talking about how the divine relics are items that are used by the pagans, which reading that is pretty harsh. That Mustari candidate is pissed at what was just said. The Sanctus Church is basically now telling them to go and steal the relics from the pagan homeland now. They will steal the Mustari's very culture. Even Heisme says that Forden is stooping to a new low. Those relics are cultural touchstones, vital to their hearts and faith, and Forden just ordered everyone to loot them as we please. Luis summons you. He explains that he will give Forden his finale. He tells you that now you need to go get the lance on his behalf. It is called Dracodios. Juna is going to join you on this hunt, so now you have to go find information on this lance. You go to find the Mustari candidate. He explains that the divine relics are symbols of their faith. They are the soul of their culture and history. Hulkenberg shares that from her studies that these relics are labeled as primitive in make and function, and often dangerous. Juna says that divine relics aren't primitive in the least. She says that it's just the Sanctus propaganda. Really, it's the opposite. Most of these relics are powerful beyond belief, and igniters are crude imitations of them. The Mustari and even myself is surprised to hear Juna say this after her speech she just gave to the crowd. When Stroll brings up Dracodios, the Mustari admits that it is their most powerful relic. He says that it is kept on an island not far. That would make it Virga Island, home of the Mustari. The Mustari doesn't want to get rid of the Sanctus, he just didn't want to see his home destroyed, which is why he was in the race. He also lets you know that his name is Adeni, and he explains that no ship would carry you and everyone to the island, and that it is no place for outsiders. They discuss how they're going to get to that island. It is impossible because of the current, but the nurse comes in and says he is on the job. He has somehow rigged the gauntlet runner to now sail across the ocean. Then Fidelio and Basilio appear to join the party. They're coming with you to monitor you on the island. Yippee! On your way to the island, this actually opens up the opportunity to now fish if you would like. On the way to the island, you are attacked by someone in the water. Nereus is losing his mind because it is a huge monster. There are tentacles everywhere, and the head of the monster appears and it's a human. The brothers distract the arms while you go for the head. Also at this point, now that Juna has joined the party, it's time to figure out who will fight with you. Now during the battle, you could switch anyone out, but you can only have 4 members out at a time. This battle isn't too difficult as long as you have thunder abilities attached. You arrive at Virga Island. You need to gather the lance and leave by September 5th. You hear a voice in your head, but you and everyone else continue to walk around and you come across a natural spring. And then you hear that voice again. And then you come across a woman in the natural spring. And then you are surrounded by Mustari soldiers. The brothers got away and now you are locked up. And it turns out you're also locked up with Bolton, the crier who has been doing the majority of the announcements for the tournament. We also now get a look at what Adeni really looks like without his mask. We see the villagers speaking to Adeni about when the disaster strikes their land. They have to offer a sacrifice to the dragon god so that he might ease their woes. We see Adeni's sister come into the conversation to calm everyone down. She is their sacrifice to the dragon god. Her name is Yufa, and she is the priestess of this island. If her island island can be saved, she will gladly give her life for the people. Her and her brother will get ready to head to the Dragon Temple. The brothers are listening to this conversation, and they think the lance is there. They need to get a boat to get to the Dragon Temple, but they decide to wait until night to save Lady Juna from the prison. That night, they free Juna, but Fidelio doesn't want to save the rest of them. Basilio is able to talk some sense into Fidelio, and as soon as the brothers share the information that they may need to fight a dragon, Juna tells Fidelio they need to untie everyone now. There is no way she's going to face a dragon without them, and I don't blame her. Once out, you all decide you will go and get the lance and let no innocent lives be taken. You then come across Edeni. He appears to have been injured. He is begging you to help him. His sister is in danger and the temple is full of magla. Edeni's injuries are critical, so you decide to gamble and take him back to the village. This way, hopefully you win the village's favor and to accept you. Edeni explains that the melancholia has set in and turned the beast feral. They made short work of the guards. Edeni and Yufa were separated, and he was the only one who made it to the sea. He says that his soldiers can't handle the monsters, so Heisme volunteers you and the rest of your team. You need to get the lance anyway, but Heisme asks, what does he want to do with his sister once they find her? Complete the ritual or bring her back? Edeni says, bring his sister home. He actually intended to let his sister escape when they left, but she had no fear in his eyes, and he faltered. Yufa's been bearing the villagers' fears and anxieties, and he asks you to save her from the curse that the village placed on her. If you save her, he agrees in allowing you to borrow Dracodios. Yufa has enough food to survive for weeks in that temple. The next day you head for the Dragon Temple. When you get to the Dragon Temple, Juna says she thinks the reason the Sanctus Church doesn't want anyone near the island is that they want whatever is inside to stay buried. Once you try to get through the entrance, there's a giant tree blocking them. They think the melancholia is influencing it, and they can't cut through it. Then all of a sudden Fidelio falls to the ground in pain. He has a fever, and it turns out his injury from the human fight is infected and inflamed. Fidelio passes out, and you rush back to the island to get him medical help. Back on Virga Island, the doctors were able to help him. If he waited any longer, he may have lost his foot, but he needs to rest to break the fever and heal. The doctor warns him if he doesn't rest and heal, he may lose that foot altogether. Then you ask Edeni about the tree, and Edeni shares with you that there is a potion of blight that they could use, but you have to find the potion. Basilio agrees to stay back with his brother while you and the rest of the team go and get the lance. You just have to go get information from the informant in the Honeybee Inn on the potion, and you can buy the ingredients from Grand Trad as well. Simple enough. You bring the ingredients back to Edeni, and he is able to make the potion. Then you set off to the temple again. Once you pour the potion on it, it is a monster in disguise as a tree, and it doesn't appreciate you doing that. It's an easy fight though, as long as you have fire magic to burn it with. Before you go back to the temple, you see Juna has been working with some of the islanders. She learns that monsters have been raiding the tombs just off the coast. She wants us to help them with this problem, and you need to complete this in order to start the bond with her. The legends of this island is that if you offer your dead to the snakes there, their souls ascend to become guardian deities. The problem is the monsters are eating the snakes. The next day you can take Juna on the request to help the islanders with their monster eating snake problem, and she makes you escort her, and this is how you form your bond with her. Now you're free to go into the temple and find Yufa. This dungeon is a little bit of a riddle and takes some patience to get through. You have to pay attention to the direction you're going. Basically, if you're going the wrong way, you won't be able to see what's in front of you. So if the path starts to get foggy, I turn around and start going down another path. If you go down the wrong path, it just takes you right back to the beginning of the area. Now what is most interesting with this temple is you come across different murals. There is one that says the War of Ruin, and it looks like maybe depicting the war that led to the destruction of the old world. It also shows there are dragons and other monsters in this fight as well. Juna says they could be ancient gods. The next mural you can find is the World After Ruin. Based off of the name, it depicts those who may have perished in the city that went up in flames. It almost seems like the world was on the brink of destruction by this war. Also on the bottom of the mural, it looks like people are gradually changing. And the left, it looks like a human, but on the right, it looks like a regular person. The next mural is the Old World. Looks like an ancient city, maybe with tall buildings, but it also looks like there are monsters surrounding it. But it also looks like maybe these monsters are being worshipped. A world where there is more than one god, which is a very different history than the Sanctus Church is teaching. Finally, you find Yufa. She introduces herself to you. She explains that she found a room with the least amount of magla. The Musari have a third eye that shows them the magla flow. You explain that you're not here for the sacrifice, but you're here to take her back, as her brother asked of you. She does not want to go back because she feels like if she doesn't complete the sacrifice, her people will suffer. You guys all agree at least to keep going to see what is going on, because you have to get Dracodios anyway. So now it is time to go deeper into the temple. You come across another mural called Our Origins. It looks like it's the origins legends of the Mustari because of all the people have 3 eyes. Yufa explains the guy in the center was their first chief. The next mural is the birth of the priestess. Yufa explains the dragon god is their protector deity, but also an impetuous god of conflict. Sometimes its all-consuming rage is directed at the island. The priestess makes herself a sacrifice. Legends foretell that in offering her life to beg for mercy, the dragon god's spirit is appeased. When you get further down, you come across something really surprising. You traveled so far underground, but you can see the sky, but also a sunken city. This is Dragongrace Shinjuku, the remnants of an ancient civilization. The Mustari refer to as the Lost City. She also explains that her ancestors discovered this place along with the lance, and looking at the building you are in, it looks like the building we see in our own everyday lives. But looking outside and seeing Shinjuku flooded is a crazy thing to see. You come across human monsters on your way down. Seems they're trying to keep intruders out, but Yufa doesn't understand because why would the dragon god want to keep the priestess out? Either way, the team moves forward and tries to figure out how to get to the lower floors. While exploring, you find more items from the old world. There is a piece of paper that describes the calamity that caused the city to sink underground. There is another document that talks about the discovery of Magla and the era of science to end. And Juna asks, what is science? Which is an interesting thing to hear that they don't know what science is, but it seems that maybe Magla was part of this calamity. As you get further down, you come across another mural titled Dragon God Eht. Yufa explains that the dragon god normally dwells within Dracodios, but it takes on its dragon form only when the priestess wields Dracodios. Heisman and Galka point out the contradiction in the story. If it only appears when the priestess wields Dracodios, then how does it appear to harm the village? There is another mural called The Priestess and the Dragon God. It is a little confusing to look at this. If the priestess is supposed to be the dragon's meal, why does it look like the priestess is fighting with the dragon? Yufa gives you a little backstory on her parents. They were the former priestess and chief of their village. They died out at sea 10 years ago. They went to seek the dragon god, even though there was no ritual needed at the time. After Yufa has been traveling with you and everyone else, she thinks that her parents were questioning the ritual, whether these sacrifices held any meaning, and also to maybe protect their children. This was probably one of my favorite moments. Yufa is talking about how she doesn't see her life as a sacrifice. Those born into blessing must give back in turn. Such a duty is no more than a simple common sense, which me listening to her was frustrating. That isn't common sense. But then Juna says, that's it, I'm getting you out of here, deal with it. And Yufa is asking if she did not hear a word she just said, and Heisme says, oh, we heard. Fools like us just barely listen. It is finally time to see this dragon, but the problem is a human clings to the dragon. The dragon attacks you and everyone else with its tail whip, and Yufa goes for Dracodios. Yufa begins to beg you not to take away her purpose. She doesn't know what to do. This was all that she had. Hulkenberg is the first to apologize. She was quick to judge and points out that Yufa has a proud heart, but she does raise a question to Yufa. See the truth? Is this your god? A god who demands martyrs? Who desires tragedy? Is that truly a god worth of your devotion and faith? She then asks, have you come here only to be saved? Or will you find a purpose beyond death to stand and fight as a savior? And Yufa gets up and awakens to her power. She says if she cannot save them in death, then she will save them in life. Now you have to fight the dragon and the human. You have to get them separated. Yufa's abilities are interesting because she can summon other monsters. As you level her up and awaken more of her powers, she actually eventually is able to summon other demons that will look very familiar in an Atlus world. Also, even Juna's abilities with her mask abilities is homage to the Persona franchise. We see her with an invoker like in Persona 3, but then the cards are like in Persona 4. And her talking about different masks I saw as Persona 5 reference. I think these are some of my favorite references. After you separate the dragon and the human, Yufa pulls back the dragon into the lance. She returns it back to its vessel, and you have finally gotten a hold of the legendary lance Dracodios. They realize all the tragedies were maybe from the melancholia caused by the human. Yufa doesn't think it's quite that. She notices that the human seems to have been blocking its eyes and ears. The Musari reject the world beyond ours, lost and comforted by ignorance, and inadvertently it is our god we cling to as cause and answer to their suffering. She says maybe we only have ourselves to blame, a self-inflicted madness. Our hearts are the source of Magla. A new mural appears before you all. It shows the priestess fighting with the dragon. Stroll asks maybe this is the true meaning of the priestess, offering her life to quell the calamity threatening the village. Maybe this is what it really means. That makes sense now why the god is in the lance instead of an urn. The people of Mustari had it wrong. They didn't even question it. But then the human ends up making a run for it. It jumped into the water and heads straight to Yufa's village. village, so you rush back to the village. Back at the village, Fidelio and Basilio helped evacuate the villagers. You go and fight the human and finish it off once and for all. Yufa is actually able to summon the dragon god now during battle. After you defeat the human, Yufa explains the true meaning of the ritual. So the Sanctus Church scripture is fiction, but the Musari didn't do a good job either of upholding their history, but now they can change that together. Up above, we see Fidelio and Basilio discussing Luis's ideal world. Fidelio says that blood doesn't matter as long as you can fend for yourself, but Basilio questions that. What if you can't fend for yourself? Like the village they just saved. The next day, Yufa says she can't let us borrow the lance, but what if she travels with you? She wants to know what the world is like outside of her village, as she points out that if you were able to hold the lance, you would lose your powers of magic, which would be an inconvenience. She explains that the protective magla that surrounds you would dispel because of the lance. So Stroll and you test this. Turns out it's true. The king's magic doesn't work because of the lance. So this may be your chance to take Luis out. You explain the plan to kill Luis and why you want to kill him. You come up with the idea to give Luis a fake lance instead. NieR says he's able to create a fake lance that you can give Luis. You all discuss doing this attack on Saint's Day. Later, back at the inn, Yufa comes in and you both take a look at his book. Despite all the people share in common, the world is filled with myriad faiths and beliefs. Accordingly, those in search of spiritual meaning may seek and find many different teachings to guide them. Basically, everyone is allowed to believe in any god that they believe. And thinking back to the mural in the temple, it does seem like they believed in different gods. I like what Yufa said here. Perhaps freedom unchecked give rise to conflict. Either way, to know the past is to ensure history does not repeat. The next day, Yufa tells her brother that she wants to go travel the rest of the world with you and everyone else. He of course approves. In this conversation as well, Edeni wants to rename the village. Eht Ria is the name he decides after their dragon god. The next day, Edeni tells you and Yufa about the trials of Molnova. It is on an island with a monster that feeds off of the magla. He thinks Yufa should try it. This also introduces you to a way to deal with the weather. Depending on the weather, the monsters you may face may be stronger, but you don't have to change it if you don't want to, if you want more of a challenge or more XP. Edeni is able to change the weather for a day if you would like him to. You will need to do this trial to unlock Yufa's bond and to get access to her archetype. The trial is not anything difficult. For Yufa, this trial has shown her that she is more than an offering. While it revealed her weaknesses, it also revealed her strength. Now she wants to continue to build her inner strength so she may go wherever it is that she has decided to go. She has a long way to go and asks that you travel with her, and with that you now have a bond with Yufa. Quick note about Yufa and her summons, you can actually unlock more of her summons in Academia under special experiments. You get the talismans from the different monsters you face, or you can even buy some from a specific merchant. Also under special experiments is how you unlock more of Juna's masks as well. At some point we see Fidelio's foot is still bothering him. Juna is concerned because it is an injury from a human. She doesn't want to risk it getting worse, so they want Rella to come look at it, and they decide to bring Rella to the island. It would be easier to bring her to the island than the Magnus brothers to her. What I want to make note of is that at some point one of the villagers thanks Fidelio for helping him with the evacuation, and Fidelio says don't worry about it, he didn't want the annihilation of the village on his conscience. Rella actually knows the brothers. She healed them years ago. When speaking to Fidelio, she asks if he's dealing with any anxiety or fear of any sort. She has observed the flow of magic in people for years now. She is certain that Magla is connected to their emotions. He says he is fine. She says then he should be fine and to not take life for granted. She encourages him to go on a race with Basilio. If he can do that, then there is nothing wrong with his foot. Once they go on their race, Rella gives you a warning not to underestimate Luis. The king's magic makes people think that they are invincible. She also shares that she thinks the magic only stops underhanded approaches, like an ambush. But if both parties, for example, agree to a duel and a fight with consent, the magic will stop protecting them. Rella instincts are telling her that Saint's Day will lead to more bloodshed before the day is over. Later that night, Fidelio and Basilio ask you about taking a look at the book. In this world, one can become anything they desire. Neither birth nor status decides your occupation. Anyone is free to become anything. This is a paradise of equality and freedom, devoid of discrimination or prejudice. Fidelio says that this may be a utopia, but he bets people in this world would fantasize the world they are currently living in. Basilio said if they really could do anything, Basilio wants to open up a diner with Del. The next day, before you depart, the islanders are having a festival and you and everyone are invited. Also, just in time, NieR has finished the lance. Batlin also shares a story about his father. When he was young, there was an alleged Parapus riot that broke out, but Batlin's father said it wasn't true. The Sanctus Church lied about it. He accused the crown theocracy of turning an innocent Parapus feral through horrific horrific magic experiments. No one believed his father and called him a liar, and he died young. He then points out that people will always prefer their own feelings to the truth. Now, another quick note here. During this festival, you can make a wish with someone on your team. I originally thought this was a way you can romance a character, so my first playthrough, I picked Juna. Turns out, you don't get to romance any character in this game, but you do get a unique weapon depending on who you take. So the second playthrough, I took Gallica. Now back to the Magnus brothers. Basilio says it's easy to blame the Sanctus Church for the experiments they went through, but maybe not everyone was happy about it. Look at even Saint Rella, for example. It broke her heart seeing how badly they were injured. Even Nurse and Katarina talk about how they knew what was going on at some point as well. Basilio does raise the question about what do they really believe in? Do they really believe in the same things as Luis? Fidelio does bring up that if it wasn't for Luis, they would be nothing. He plucked them off the streets. Basilio questions Luis's speeches. He talks about equality, but in the end, he's going to leave the weak to die. That would realistically would have left Basilio and Fidelio to die in the dirt. Is that really what they're fighting for? Juno interrupts the conversation. Fidelio asks Juno flat out, do you plan to kill Count Luis? She points out you can't kill him right now. And Fidelio says he doesn't think that her heart is with Count Luis, or maybe it never was. He says there is a side of Juna that only she has shown you and your friends, and Fidelio and Basilio are only just now seeing it. Juna apologizes for making them doubt her, but she says that they need to trust her. She promises to make sure this world got more to give to Fidelio and Basilio than to spare. And I think that's the same logic I've been using. I never really lied in my answers to Luis on certain questions. When Juna leaves, Fidelio admits he saw them testing the lance and how it can get past the king's magic. And now these two have to struggle with what to do next. They don't want to kill Juna. The next day, it's time to head to Altabury. You go over the plan real quick while the brothers are gone. The plan is to give Luis the fake lance, and then use the real lance to take Luis out on Saint's Day. Juna also points out that the brothers are onto them and their plan, so they need to be careful. Altabury Heights is the capital principality of Montario, the eastmost country annexed into the kingdom of Uchronia. In the sky, there is a giant monolith. In Sanctus scripture, they tell how the stone was shaped by God's own hand. You go immediately to take the lance to Luis. Luis admits that he is glad that we were able to get the lance peacefully. Otherwise, if the islanders could not be persuaded, Luis's next course of action would have been to destroy the village to the ground. The Caradrius cannons would have made that task fairly simple, he says. Yufa is shocked by that statement, and Luis is asking why is she surprised. He says at times sacrifice is necessary to save the many. He then asks, wasn't that the reason her countrymen would have her die? Now, you can't see it here, but I'm sure the brothers made a face at Luis stating this, because like I said earlier, the brothers did not want to see the village people die. The Saints' Day Festival will be a 2-day event. The first day, Juna is scheduled to perform. This is also the event when Forden dies, by Luis's hand. Also, Luis will be making an appearance at the festival. He also asks that you drop out of the race and dedicate your service to him. After you are done talking to Luis, it is time to look for an inn, and Yufa suggests to find one run by Mustari. Now, what is interesting to learn about this, Gallica thought this city was a seat of the church. Before the church, it is said that many diverse faiths and teachings took root in this city. That's why Montario is the only mainland nation that trades with the islands. Hulkenberg confirms this. Until her grandfather's generation, the only prominent building of Sanctus Church was the Opera House. Now also the teachings in the Sanctism reclaim this land from malevolent pagans. Yufa sure there are some Mustari who did not go through conversion and live in seclusion, which you do learn about this from talking to some of the other Mustari in this area. The Mustari were living in Altabury Heights first, but then the Sanctus Church came in and annexed them, forcing the people to either convert or leave. Some converted while others did not. Now, at the hotel, you go over the plan to assassinate Luis. Luis is not a normal person. They need a plan to attack from a distance. There is a chandelier at the top of the opera house big enough to support a person, and that gives your team the opportunity to strike Luis while he is in a royal box seat. Also, with Yufa's ability, she will be able to pull the lance back to her after the strike, so they will be able to make their escape. Heisme will cause a distraction and strike Stroll and Hulkenberg will be in charge of getting an escape route, while you and Yufa get to the roof to pull off the attack. Juna will be on the stage performing. Later that night, we also see the Magnus brothers dealing with their doubt on what is the right path. Is Luis really the best option? Then we also see Luis is talking to some hooded figure. Seems like he is plotting something as well. The next day, you're all preparing and everyone is talking about how this is their last mission. If this fails, you have no more leads after this. So you take off to the opera house and everyone begins the mission. Not to get too much into it, there will be some small challenges to get to the roof. First, you have to look for the key to get to the roof, and then throughout your travels to the roof, you'll have to fight some Sanctus church guards. Down below, you see Forden going on some bullshit rant about how the pagans looted the relics from the church's vaults, and how it was God's power that gave this chalice he is presenting power. When asked how did Forden get this, he says, it's simply preaching God's word and spread of his teachings. Mutual dialogue is what won the day. Sure. He then says through guided prayer, anyone can be saved. Does that even include you, Forden? You can hear the people in the crowd believe these relics were originally from Sanctus Church. You make it to the roof and Stroll and Hulkenberg make it up there, and they have secured an escape route. It is time for you to strike Luis down. Juna takes the stage to perform, and it is your time to strike. You see Luis and you throw the lance. Now, a quick note here. This is me just nitpicking. You're telling me no one notices bright blue light? Anyway, you throw the lance and it looks like it striked him, but you can't tell. Yufa tries to call the lance back, but she is unable to do it. You all rush back to the rooftop before the lights come back on, and you try to make your escape, but Luis meets you on the roof. The lance did wound him. Luis offers you final words, and your last words are to have a duel with him, and he was waiting for it and accepts the duel. He was aware of the loophole in the king's magic. He agrees to fight you with whoever you wish to fight with and whatever weapons you want to use. After you fight him, he does take the advantage that you falter, but Yufa takes the opportunity to summon the lance, and you stab Luis with the lance. He asks son, why are you so intent on killing me? He realizes that you are the intruders looking for the formula. He points out that we have achieved nothing with this. Luis falls through the glass roof and lands in the center of the stage of the opera house with the lance with him. Stroll's idea is now to go downstairs and take the stage and try to earn the people's sympathy. They need to try to get the lance from Forden. One of Forden's men look over Luis and he is confirmed dead. And now Forden realizes the lance was the murder weapon and the power that it has. Once you and your team take the stage, you admit that the lance was your item for the tournament and you were the ones who took down Luis. And Stroll admits to everyone what your plan was this entire time. Forden is of course using this moment to take advantage and is taking the lance. He looks at Hulkenberg and knows she was the knight there on the night of the attack. He says that Hulkenberg's blade even struck the back of the person who placed the curse on the prince. He is praising Hulkenberg, and after that, the Magnus brothers confront you as well. You explain everything on why you went after Luis. I do not blame Fidelio's reaction. Doing this for the prince, when the king was a puppet of Forden, it is because of this that Forden gained the power that he did and the country became the state that it is. Yufa points out that she noticed the brothers' faces when Luis talked about burning down her home. They decided maybe they should just leave this work. Maybe they will go open up that restaurant now. But you check on the prince's condition and the curse is not lifted. You go back to the end to figure out why this has happened. Hulkenberg thinks that maybe the curse was casted by a different person. Yufa asks, did we murder an innocent man? Now, Luis was not innocent. Luis said it himself. Killing him accomplished nothing. Perhaps the reason Luis had the curse information was he was researching it for another reason. If he was framed for an example, maybe he was trying to clear his name. Hulkenberg starts to recall that night. She's trying to think back to see if there was something she missed. But my 2 cents is, all the assailants were wearing masks, but Grias swore he saw Luis. Yeah, okay. But anyway, Hulkenberg realizes something. She has never admitted to anyone that she struck the assailant in the back. Back then, she only told the investigators that she had failed to capture the culprit. She was ashamed for her failures and stayed silent on the rest. And they realized that Forden admitted he knew about the person being struck in the back. He told a story that no one but the culprit could attest to. How would Forden know this? Which means he could potentially have been behind the attack. It wasn't long after the prince's passing that the king named Sanctum as the state religion. If it wasn't for the king's magic, Forden would have taken the throne. The next day is the final day of the festival. Forden still holds the lance, and Forden is milking up Luis's death, saying that the kingdom's trust lies with him. He's basically trying to end the tournament here and now, even though the throne isn't decided by him, but this will give him an advantage now. So you take to the stage to get the lance now. You confront Forden about being the mastermind behind the prince's attack. Forden is so full of himself. He says Luis is dead and so are the royals. He is the only one that remains. And then someone else walks onto the stage. stage. When Forden asks who this man is, that man appears behind him and you hear Luis's voice. And also, if you remember at the beginning of the game, Luis did the same thing to Forden, appearing right behind Forden, always having the upper hand. Forden tries to attack Luis, but the king's magic protects him, and Luis reveals that he has the true lance and strikes Forden down. With this, Luis was able to prove that he is innocent in the prince's murder, and that Forden was the mastermind behind it all. Turns out that Forden's attendant that confirmed Luis's death was actually Zorba. Zorba was the one behind him surviving. The killing blow missed his heart, and Zorba used magic to heal him overnight. Zorba swapped out the real lance for the counterfeit, and this also shows that Luis knew the entire time that you were not on his side. He also said that if he died then, he was never fit to complete his ambitions, which in a way, going back to my comment on him being a Griffith lookalike, that sentence just kind of reminded me of him. Luis is able to figure out your plan that the prince indeed did survive that night. He tells you speak or die, and then begins to aim the lance at the crowd, getting ready to attack a family. When you go to block the attack, the Magnus brothers jump in to protect that family. Luis does not stop his attack on the brothers, but instead makes his attack stronger to break their shields, and Fidelio protects Basilio and gets hit with a fatal wound. In Dell's dying breath, he comes to the conclusion, if all the weak get left behind, who's left to protect them? He asks Basilio to look after Juna, and with that, he passed. Basilio points out that in Luis's world, the strong are right and the weak are wrong. Basilio and Fidelio thought that Luis would be able to put a stop to all meaningless discrimination. They are ready to fight Luis, but the church guards show up, and it's time to make a run for it. But Basilio wants to go after Luis. Yufa stops him from getting himself killed, and they make a run for it. Juna and Basilio gave Fidelio a funeral. Basilio now needs time to mourn. The curse is not lifted, even with Forden's death, so that means someone else cast the curse. Basilio goes on his own for a walk, and he's seeing his brother. Fidelio tells him from now on, Basilio is taking the lead, and Basilio doesn't know if he can. Fidelio tells him that reality is, it was Basilio that was the strong one. Fidelio asks Basilio to swear he will always protect the weak. If he can do that, Fidelio will always be with him. And now Basilio awakens to his power. He awakens to the Berserker archetype. The sweet thing is, after he awakens, the family that Basilio and Fidelio saved, they wanted to pay their respects to Fidelio, and now Basilio has joined your party. Now we get to see the leaders try and figure out what just happened and what their next steps are. They bring in Rella, and they ask that Rella take over Forden's replacement. Godot is salty by this choice. They talk about how the people would flock to her as someone to ease their fears. Rella is hesitant, but it's either her or Luis, and the announcement will be tomorrow. So now you have to figure out what you're gonna do next. It will be a challenge to get the prince to the throne. So Basilio says, what if we had the protagonist pretend to be the prince? He does look similar to the prince, and you agree to do it. Stroll raises the question about the royal family as Clamar though, and you are Elda, but Hulkenberg points out that the prince is missing the horns of Clamar. Some rumors were spread that the prince may have been Elda blood, but any aristocratic would have heard that story in passing, so they have the plausibility to shake the nobles to the core. The next day, it's time for the church's announcement. Rella appears before everyone. She announces that she will succeed Forden, and she will become queen of this land. The people are ecstatic to hear this announcement. Godot disagrees with this choice and tries to get the people to disagree with this choice. The people have doubts about Godot, but then Luis shows up in the middle of this discussion. In his speech, he's going on about how the world is lawless and the church does nothing about it, and how they are lying to the people, and he will lead the people to the truth, and it is time to be judged only by our abilities. Victory means nothing unless won by skill. Rella asks him, what skill would you put on display? And Luis thinks that there should be no more reason to forbid the killing of candidates. He then yells at the king to see if the king will drop his magic. He is proving the point that he has the lance. The lance has the power to get past the king's magic, so with the lance's power, victory is assured to be Luis. But surely the king would not want the race to be decided like this. The people begin to panic, but Rella says no matter what happens, even if he gets all the power he desires, she will always stand to defend you. The king agrees to Luis's demands. Now his magic will not protect the top candidates. Also, you can see in the king's face, Luis, Rella, and yourself are the top 3 candidates. Luis throws the lance aside and then tells the people, the fog of the deception has finally cleared. There is no God. He tells them to think hard on your salvation and whether you'll find it in prayer. People begin to ask, does that mean he denies them their prayer? Which it sure does sound like it. Luis looks at you and says, now that we know Luis did not cast the curse, the only thing now is for you to go after the throne, and now he will face the real you. He tells you that you need to follow the king's example and abandon your ideals. Hulkenberg then tells Luis he will never take the throne throne and tells him that the rightful heir will take the throne and announces you as the prince. No one believes it because, one, the prince is said to be dead, and the fact that he is an Elda. Rella confirms it though. She saw it herself when she treated the prince, but was told not to reveal anything to the public. But it is true. The prince is Elda. The mother was Elda. Luis laughs at this. Luis said that he had been dead for so long, no one can denounce the claim. Luis will be at the royal capital and will wait for the last one standing, and he takes his leave. Godot now has to confront Rella again. He is butthurt that he does not get to claim the throne. He questions whether she is ready for a fight with Luis or not. I was really surprised by this. Rella points out that he was in charge of Forden's guard, and he failed to protect him. Does Godot have room to talk? He then raises his weapon and is ready to fight, but his magic does not work. Then all of a sudden we see thorns surrounding Godot. She tells Godot to stand down. Now you and your friends realize real quick those thorns are the same thorns that have cursed the prince. She tells everyone that she will protect everyone and cast a spell on everyone. Rella talks about how Forden used Sanctism only as a tool, a means to exploit the people, abuse his authority, and mask injustice as piety. She points out that this twisted form of Sanctism saved no one. What makes salvation true? Rella says she will save the people of this land in her words and in the truest sense. They shall live with no worries, no anxieties, now and forevermore. Hulkenberg points out, but through magic, you may force the fears out of their hearts, but you've stripped the people of their free will. Now this logic may sound familiar if you followed my channel. This was referenced in Ending D of NieR Automata, or even Neon Genesis Evangelion with the Human Instrumentality Project. This isn't an exactly uncommon storyline, as a lot of creators got their inspiration from the novel Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. Even Rella agrees that maybe we can't save them from stripping their free will. Then she now turns the conversation on you for claiming the protagonist is the prince. She then says the shocking truth. The prince is surely at death's door, isn't he? After all, your efforts did nothing to lift the curse. She said the prince's curse was crafted to perpetually draw upon the caster's magic. She knows he suffers because she still lives. Hulkenberg is shocked because they called Rella to heal him after he was cursed. Rella hits home for Hulkenberg though. She reiterates that it was Hulkenberg's blade that carved into Rella's back, and Hulkenberg is basically saying red at this point. She goes in for the attack, but Yufa stops her because she can see the magla surrounding Rella. Juna is shocked and points out that she was only 12 years old at the time, and Rella points out that so was Luis. All the better for any witnesses to suspect him of the crime, which makes sense on why Grias swore he saw Luis. All Grias saw was a child in a mask and made the assumption it was Luis. But because she was interrupted in the casting, the curse became incomplete, a spell with no formula that was unbreakable. All you can do now is kill the caster. Rella then says, as heiress to the Sanctus Church, she will not hand over the royal scepter to Luis or you. She tells Juna she will await for us in the failures of the Sanctus Church, lied buried, and then she disappears. Godot stops you. He's really salty at you too. He says you and your friends ruined everything. The church, his authority, everything. Looks like, buddy, that is a problem for your system. It failed because of one group of friends and Luis? Yeah, systematic issues there, buddy. He won't let you escape. Leave it to the church to sentence you without a trial. Nereus appears along with more of the church gauntlet runners. It's time to make a run for it. They can't use teleportation. The only thing they can do is escape by sky. And Nereus agrees and says, then we fly. There is a chance they will all die because we do not know if it'll work. But this has been a lifelong dream of Nereus, and he gets to put it to the test, and then the wings come out and he did it. They're flying now. They discuss their next plans and where Rella went to. Juna says she went to the Mage Academy, or at least what remains of it. She was a student there once, which explains why Juna knows so much of magic as she does. The other reality they must face is that they will have to kill Rella to save the prince. They ask Juna if she wants to stay behind, and she tells everyone if at the last minute she really can't face it, then we can leave her where she stands, but she has to go with. Juna says that there are rumors that the dragon is here where the academy is. Dragons may look like monsters, but they're not true flesh and blood creatures. They're testaments to the lost world. That's why the academy's here to study them. When you find Rella, she is cold-hearted towards Juna. She tells Juna that she is just another acquisition of house sickness, but Juna is not buying it. No matter how much Rella tries to push her away, no one else in your party buys it either. Stroll points out that anyone aiming to kill a royal is risking their life for a cause, but what would a 12-year-old girl be willing to die for? Basilio points out if Rella were to die for someone, it would be for Juna. Rella admits that she has a question for you all, and that is why she has summoned you to this place. Whoever defeats Luis will win win the throne. But can you save those who remain in Sanctism? Those people Luis marked as weak. The world already rejects many for their weakness. With nowhere to turn, they seek comfort in faith. If you would sacrifice them for freedom, you're no better than Luis. You say that you will not abandon any of them, but until Rella knows you can be a true king, she refuses to die. The weapon that Rella holds is the same as the lance. It is a weapon of dragonic command. Dragons are manifested avatars of mortal fear. If you would be king, you have to show her that you can conquer it. And guess what? It's an ice dragon, so you just need fire. But as you fight this dragon, eventually Rella gives all of her magic to the dragon. But even with that, the dragon is still weak to fire attacks. After the fight, Rella confesses to everything. She was only 12 on that night. We see a flashback to Forden giving poor little Rella the command. Forden says that the king brought his mongrel of a boy to the castle and says if we do not act now, one day we will be bending the knee to an Eldan king. I can honestly say he will not be missed. He is also talking about how Luis, who was only a boy at the time, is becoming a problem. Forden doesn't like that Luis doesn't respect the church, but his military merits are getting too great to ignore. Forden admits that they will dispose of the prince and put the blame on Luis. Rella tries to reason with Forden. The prince is innocent, and to commit an unforgivable atrocity, Forden brings up Juna and putting pressure on Rella to protect her family, or she will regret one night of lapse of judgment. Juna meant the world to Rella and also gave Rella hope for living. She also says that Luis seeks more than the crown. After the attack on the prince, Rella was told to investigate Luis as a suspect, and she touched his hand and read deeply into the flow of his magla. She says she will never forget. He did not hesitate at all. A vision plunged into her mind, pure and vivid and violent. She saw humans flooding the country, innocents, either fleeing or lost to madness. And amidst the chaos, she saw no throne, no castle. That was his real vision of the world. We have proven to Rella we can fight Luis. Rella will reveal the truth to people. With that spell she casted on the people and the relic, she can reach the people of Altabury from the Academy. She tells the people that you are the prince, and then she admits that Forden was behind the assassination attempt on the prince. He did this to elevate the church and put the throne in his grasp. She also admits that she was the one who cast the curse on the prince. She tells the people that no matter who you are, the prince will accept everyone, and with his strength, he will shelter the lost and weak and stand against Luis. Rella apologizes to Juna. The curse is already taking Rella's life. She leaves this country and her sister in your hands. She is frozen solid now, and we see the curse being lifted from the prince and he wakes up. This story does a great job of making you really think about things. The world isn't simply black and white. Back in the city, there is an announcement from Luis. Luis threatens anyone that is against him with death. He said blind defiance will be met with death. He proposes on September 24th at the royal capital. They will settle this in a contest of single combat. He welcomes any number of adversaries. Since you have time to kill before September 24th, and you could work on side missions and bonds, like for example, starting the bond with Basilio. After Del died, Basilio is trying to figure out what does he do next? Where does he want to go? For now, he's going to continue to get stronger and stop Luis's plan. You fly back to the capital for the confrontation with Luis, and you're met with applause from the people. Yet again, it's time to plan for the last battle with Luis. We see Zorba talking to Luis, and he has found where the prince is hiding. He is in the lost village of the Elda. Forden's troops were sent there to burn it to the ground. Luis seems to know a lot about the royal family and the Elda village's tragic past. He talks about Forden sent his soldiers there not because of any defiance against the scriptures. Forden only wanted to eliminate an inconvenience heir, the heir that was a threat to his power. Luis tells Zorba to go snuff them out for good. The next day, you go to the cathedral to meet Luis. Luis is still going on about how it's all about power to rule, and if you follow him, you have his shield, and all that defy him will be slain without mercy or regret. And then you have to fight him again. Luis is able to switch what type of magic to use against you and can find a weakness. So if you have a character that's weak to ice, he'll find that and use it against you. After the fight, Luis talks about how the protagonist is actually a member of the fallen humankind. Luis now tells the people that you are human, and he then shows them proof. Luis does a spell on you, and then the protagonist begins to transform, and then he transforms into a giant. You all of a sudden hear a voice. That voice is telling you that this is not your true form. That man has twisted your magic and mind, but this voice is telling you to remember your true purpose and true self. You see a vision of the prince, but then you wake up, and you are surrounded by the guards. Luis is proud of the fact that he thinks he has won the throne, and Luis shares that the true prince in the forest is dead. The only option we have at this point is to head to the Eldan Sanctum, so we make our escape from the angry crowd. You make it to the forest, and you come across a village that is in ruins. Gallica shares that the soldiers came and burned this place to the ground, and thinking back on it, Forden was the one who led the charge. More than half of the villagers were wiped out, and the rest hide in caves so people think that they were wiped out. You come across an elder Ujif named Russell who is trying to bury the dead. He sadly lets you know that the prince has died, even after you just saved him from the curse. There was an assassin that came, and the prince jumped in front of him to protect the others. This poor kid, he's been attacked twice now, all because of the family he was born in. You go down the cave. He is in the prayer room just straight ahead, but on the way down you hear the strange voice, saying it's nearly time. You get to the bottom and you see the prince lying there in the center of the room. The chiefess of the tribe comes and greets you as well. You learn the prince's mother was queen of the Elda tribe. She saved her son from the flames, but she died in the process. Gruide is not a fan of the former king either, and I don't blame her. He didn't stop Forden from burning down the village. She is shocked to see you and does not recognize you. But then all of a sudden you hear that voice again. This voice is telling you to remember the path. This voice tells you that the prince's life has not ended. The voice is telling you to remember everything in your journey, and basically you're going through the memories of the game leading up to this point. This voice asks, if the prince is dead, then what is the point to keep going on? You give the answer, he is not dead, and with that answer you have earned the truth. The curse kept him asleep, but his soul remained. This voice, however, extracted his soul to be able to travel the land. Then this voice asks you, who are you? You can give the answer of just a traveler or the prince's friend, but you get the same result. The voice is asking about his memories, such as his parents, memories of his youth, any recollection of his childhood memories, his earliest memories of his friends with the prince. But his actually the earliest memory was getting the mission from Gallica. The protagonist's memories of him hanging out with the prince was fake, but the friendships he made along the way are real memories. All of these trials you gain with your other self, you are now given a choice. If you accept the truth, you'll face an ordeal beyond anything you've ever faced. Or if you desire freedom from this truth, you can end the mission here. This voice asks you one more time, who are you? And you answer, the prince. And then you start to learn the truth. You were born apart from the prince's flesh, born from the prince's desires to change the world. You are the ideal person who got to travel on behalf of the prince. You're his ideal. It began with that book that you always carry. Magla created flesh, and then it created a form, the form of an Elda. Now you are truly awakened and reborn anew. And this time, no longer for the prince's dream of a utopia, but your own. And then we see the two halves become one again. The voice also speaks to Gallica and helps her remember her true charge. This boy was never part of the original mission. Originally, Gallica departed alone and then found him. Since he would need a guide, this voice made her memories his as well. So this way they would share a past and purpose. So then the voice tells Gallica that her mission ends here, and now her mission is her own to choose. She can choose the future for herself. After Gallica explains everything, and after some confusion, we see Hulkenberg is just so excited and is also begging for forgiveness for everything. She vows this time she will protect him with her life. You and everyone else talk about this voice that has been guiding them. Juna thinks she may know of this voice as well, and the rest of them realize even this place looks familiar from when they first awakened to their powers. It seems that there has been someone watching them all, guiding them to here. Now, before I get too far into this, I want to make a quick note here. This is actually where you can get the first bad ending in the game. When you are asked if you want to know the truth and know who you are, you can say no, and the game actually does end right here and now. But now getting back into the story, Yufa asks Gruide to know the truth about the Elda tribe. Gruide explains that the Elda comes from an ancient word meaning the Old Ones. It was an alias given by their ancestors to outsiders who visited the village in a distant past. Their original name is in fact human. She also explains they were not the human tribe. Tribes as they know today did not exist back then. Everyone were all one people, humankind. War is what ultimately destroyed them. Even without tribes, they had division over the idea of rightness. They tried to destroy something invisible and ended up destroying themselves. This idea of rightness was born of fear, and that fear led to what was called the world before. You hear that voice again, and it tells you to be the rock in a storm for the people, and to face anxiety in their names. She also says that anxiety itself is not something to blindly reject or desperately cast away. First, we must do one simple thing: acknowledge it exists. You have to accept this and walk forward alongside it, and you will grow stronger. And with this, you've awakened to your true power, the royal heroic archetype, the prince. And a little FYI, everyone in your party can awaken to these royal powers. Gruide explains also that Luis uses a forbidden spell that turns people into the human monsters. She also shares that Luis may have a past in the Eldan Sanctum. She also explains that there was a family who perished in the fire. There was one by the name of Caridris. Funny, that is the exact same name of Luis's gauntlet runner. They were also a family of doctors. That family studied spells much like the ones that he now exploits. The notes have been lost because of the fire, but if he was from that family, that may be the reason he knows so much about all this. She then explains that magla is a substance born of the heart, generated when one feels anxiety or fear. By certain means, it may be kindled into power that we know as magic. The more anxiety and fear produces more and more magla. Without the willpower to face your fear, the magla overflows, which explains the melancholia crystals we have been seeing, which also means that Luis can turn anyone into a human monster. All people are descendants of humankind, so Luis didn't tell the whole truth when he used that spell on you. If Luis is the one from the Elda village, then he could be out for revenge. They are interrupted because Heisme hears someone running away. You chase after him, and it's Zorba. He was the one who assassinated the prince, but he noticed something was off, so he decided to wait around, and he heard everything that we talked about. Zorba summons a human to attack you. The perk now, as you've unlocked the prince, his attack gains more power when fighting humans. After you beat him, Zorba ran away back to Luis. Now, the next steps are not going to be easy. Prejudice will not just end overnight, so it will be hard, but no one is backing out of this fight. Later that night, you and Gallica look over the last chapter of the novel. The one who governs this utopia must have an unwavering will to maintain justice in this world. There are innumerable obstacles to overcome, yet as long as one lives by their ideals, those who support them are sure to follow. A utopia is not the creation of a single mind or a single power. It is a world shaped by all of its people. However, even a utopia may one day fray at the edges, and its people may come to conflict over the question of what is right, what is true utopia, what is a true ruler. None have yet to find the answers to these questions. Gallica explains that the former king was an idealist, but little by little the pain of reality crushed his hope, and he lost his son. He was broken. He didn't even lift a finger to stop the church's rise to power. It is time to head back to the royal capital. We also see Zorba giving Luis an update on what happened to the prince, and it changes nothing for Luis. He is on his way up to the palace in the sky. He makes it back to the royal palace, and he plans on taking the royal scepter for himself, and him and the former king have a conversation. More like Luis yells at him, telling the king that he threw away his ideals, but Luis will never make that mistake. I think that is one of the reasons why people are so drawn to him. His will is unshakable, while the king, being the broken old man that he was, let the church gain power. We don't hear what they say about the royal scepter, but apparently Luis is right about the power. If he were to take the power now, he can change the world itself. The king asks, how did Luis know about this? And Luis shows who he truly is. He is Elda. He was there when the king came to the village, and he was there when the village was burned down. Even Luis admits there is only one person who may be able to stop him at this point, and that is the protagonist. When you come back to the city, the sky is red, and the people are not exactly thrilled to see you. The people are just attacking and yelling at each of your friends. This is pretty extreme listening to them all. Realistically, the people's fears and anxieties are on a rise. This is more than likely has to do with Luis's speeches. We know that Luis doesn't care about status or bloodlines, but if you turn against him, you're dead. When speaking to Batlin, he shares his theory that the change in the public sentiment was too sudden. It was unnatural. He thinks that Luis did this somehow when he went up to the palace in the sky. You now have your next mission, to go up to the castle and stop Luis and stop whatever it is that he's done to manipulate the people like this. Before we get more into the main story, I figured I'd give you guys a quick summary over everyone's Bond stories. We'll start off with Moore. It turns out that Moore is the one who wrote the fantasy novel the protagonist is always glued to. Moore has lost his memories on why he is in this realm. The only people that notice him is you and Gallica. Throughout your bond, you're trying to help him remember who he is and why is he here. He thinks at some point the king may have locked him in here to keep the archetype research buried. Archetypes are banned in Sanctum, so it's not too far out of reach to assume that. He also at some point wonders if he did something to deserve being locked in here. His main goal in this bond is to help you learn about the archetypes, and his second goal is to get his memories back. He completed the first goal with you, but he was never able to regain his memories. He thought that that room was the Mage Academy, but towards the end of the bond, he doesn't think that it is. Now, a little side note here, there was an academy that was famous for a philosophical school founded by Plato in ancient Athens. It was one of the earliest institutions of higher learning in the West, and he does have a cat named Plato, so there has to be some connection here, right? Now moving on to Stroll. You and Stroll come across members that served Stroll's family, but they are struggling to find homes, and Stroll wants to help them find a home, and he will go talk to the nobleman in the capital to try to find them homes. But the nobleman is just greedy, who doesn't want to help out the quote-unquote weak. Stroll eventually learns that his parents left him an inheritance, and he uses it to get the people homes in the capital. He continues to follow in his parents' legacy of protecting the people of his house. Next is Hulkenberg. We meet a former acquaintance of Hulkenberg's named Rodanth. He's a real charmer. He immediately shows his discrimination towards you as an Elda tribe, and criticizes Hulkenberg for hanging out with you. This guy's apparently now commander of the knights. One day you go back to the capital and happen to see Rodanth doing an execution. This is normally not the role of a knight. He simply says those who would do this harm shall be punished. When you ask what was done, he says treason. This guy was a petty officer of the military police, and he apparently slandered the honor of the royal knights. Basically, we are witnessing this guy order a man to be hanged because Rodanth doesn't like him. He is abusing the power that he has gained from the church. Hulkenberg decides to challenge him to a one-on-one combat, basically a duel. She is stopping the execution of these 8 people. He agrees, but wants to fight somewhere else. He picks an isolated area, and no surprise, he plays a dirty trick. He tried to paralyze Hulkenberg, but Hulkenberg, being the badass that she is, takes that pain and still beats him. Hulkenberg worked with the Shadow Guard Knight to also get Rodanth arrested for abusing his power. Turns out he was executing people who had pissed off some nobles. Then we have Katharina. She enters the tournament to help her tribe, the Parapus. Once you get her bond link up to rank 4, she actually drops out of the tournament. Her message that she was running on was that the rich are corrupt, and when she ruled, she was going to go after them. The problem is down the line, Parapus were stealing from the rich, and a world where people just steal from the rich isn't an ideal world. It takes some time to convince her allies, but she's able to stop them from stealing, and also gets them further help to get the Parapus an education and trade skills so that way they can all better their lives. Next is Brigitte. She owns an igniter shop in the capital. She's also an associate of Gria's. After you run an errand for her, she hires you to take care of her dog, but she wants to keep the dog a secret. Someone finds out about her dog and kidnaps the dog and tells her that they killed her dog. She learns that it was an anti-igniter group, and she is about to send her personal army to go destroy the village that they are hiding in. You convince her not to do it and go to the village with her. Turns out that someone lied. This village is a peaceful UG village. She leaves the village grateful that she didn't send her men to destroy the village. But sadly, the next time you see her, it turns out someone still destroyed the village, putting her on the spot that she was the one that stopped the anti-igniter group. We see a side of Brigitte where she breaks down and cries. She doesn't know what to do. The next time we see her, she decided to open up a facility with multiple purposes. One, to provide shelter for those who need it, and also to do research on uses for igniters. She is also confronted by 2 children that were at the UG village. The church tells them that they should kill Brigitte for revenge, but she is able to convince them not to do it, and she also provides them shelter. And she has decided that she's going to sell igniters with limiters from now on, and anyone who wants to sell her the igniters without limiters will get a discount for her shop. Those children also help her with ideas on the igniters that can be used for more practical ways. This is her battle against the church. Next is Alonso. You learn that he is actually trying to save his hometown from a greedy landowner who steals from the people. You learn his mother adopted him. Unfortunately, the landowner learns about who Alonso is and sets his village ablaze. His mother died that night, and the villagers blame Alonso for everything. He vows to follow his mother's wishes and to live, and by living, he can atone. And he still plans on going after the landowner. He lays a trap for the landowner, and he tells the landowner that he has his daughter in the palm of his hands, basically. But Alonso actually lied. He admitted he lied and wants the landowner to help him with his big plan. The next time you see Alonso, he asks you if lies are necessary. And when you next see Alonso, the landowner has a knife to him, and people are surrounding him. They're talking about all the crimes that Alonso has done, and that you were the one who caught him, and you were the one that brought Alonso to justice. And the shocking twist is that the landowner executes Alonso. Alonso leaves you a note with the money that he was going to give to his village. Currently, the villagers, they want nothing to do with him and will not accept his money, so you as the hero will give them the money instead. This also helps you win support of the village. And then a little bit later, you actually learn he faked his death. He pulled off what he called the biggest show, but now he wants to continue to help you become king. Barden, as captain of the guard of Martira, he needs to add some sense of security back to the citizens and wants to help the people however he can. And the people want him to become governor. He doesn't want to, but he agrees to do it. Down the line, he takes things a little too far with protecting the citizens. There are now barriers set up at all the entrances and then more security monitoring the people. They don't exactly feel safe anymore. Well, another member of the church utilizes the people's fear in his favor and decides to have a vote for the governor's spot. Barden loses, but then the village is attacked by a human sandworm. You help Barden take it out, and the people come to realize they put too much pressure on Barden. The people talk about how they could also take some of the weight to protect each other instead of throwing it all on Barden. And they want Barden to become governor again, and he accepts it. They will all work together to make Martira a better place to live. Maria. Maria. Maria is the daughter of Grius. She is sad about her father's passing, and you grow a bond with her by helping her get through her grief. She wants to be a great help to Miss Fabian, and makes some mistakes along the way. She was worried that Miss Fabian wouldn't keep her, and Miss Fabian explains that even though they aren't family by blood, Miss Fabian sees her as a daughter. And as you start to hang out with Maria, you come across a homeless boy, and she wants to help him, but the boy denies her help. Also, there is another little boy who was a bully to her, but as she talks to him, the little boy realizes she's not as strange as his parents make her seem to be. Maria also wants to help the people around the inn, and Miss Fabian agrees. They have a potluck for all the people around them, free food for all of them, and some of the adults start to disagree because of the discrimination. But once the adults start talking, they begin to help each other out, and Maria is able to even help this little boy out that she met. She also has come to understand that her home is with Miss Fabian. She didn't know where she belonged, but she finally understands that now, and wants to continue to help people. Jaime, he sadly lost his son, and he wants to find a place that he can lay his son to rest. You go travel with him to a few locations, and it doesn't seem like it'll be a good fit, so Jaime wants to try and take him back to his old village. Jaime's son has never been to the old village, but he thought it would be a good place to rest his son. He speaks to Tadari, the head of the village. Jaime thinks this is a long shot because he is an outcast of the village, but Tadari says that the village will accept his son, but someone takes Jaime's son and hides him. Jaime leaves, not causing a scene, and you do eventually find his urn. Someone left it to where Jaime could find it. The village cut themselves off from the rest of the world. They no longer do any trade with any other villages, leaving the future of the village looking pretty bad. Jaime decides to go back to the village and talk to Tadari and the rest of them. He wants them to see that there is hope for the future, and they agree that they need to do some changing, and they will also support you as king. Now on to Juna's story. Juna is asked to perform for a festival in Brilehaven by a man named Capra, and she agrees to it, but at some point you notice a small girl who looks a lot like Juna, but the protagonist doesn't recognize her or the tribe that she comes from, and continues to look for Juna. Juna is confronted by a woman named Mitras. She was last year's performer, and Capra is trying to bring in a bigger audience, so that's why he asked Juna. She does not take kindly to that and leaves. When it's time to go pick up the dress for Juna for the festival, turns out Mitras picked up the dress. When you find her, she burnt the dress to ashes. She threatens Juna that she will put Erica flowers on the stage because they're poisonous like Juna is, as Mitras claims. She ends up not using the flowers and stops once she hears Juna sing. A member of the Sanctus Church, however, still tried to poison Juna, but Mitras got in the way and inhaled some of the poison, and Juna wants to help her, but first she has to face her own fears. In order to create the antidote, she has to find more of these Erica flowers. She eventually shows you her true form and explains that this is what all Nydia tribes look like. Now I kind of want to know what Alonso looks like. They have to hide their true identities because no one would take them seriously otherwise. It also turns out that Juna was once a slave, and she doesn't have very many memories of that because of the fact that she was so young. But she remembers the Erica flowers from that trauma. You go with Juna to find the flowers to make the antidote. She was able to find the flowers and was able to confront her trauma head on. You get back to the city and give Mitras the antidote, and she could speak again. And then Juna helps her get a gig at a bar to perform. Now for Yufa. Yufa wants to go exploring Brilehaven, and you come across the Sanctus Church, and you meet Ovi and the Sanctor Hyperic. Ovi's mother is sick and is staying at the church to get better. Hyperic tells the people, including Ovi, that they cannot neglect their prayers or Ovi's mother will not get better. Hyperic and the sick all of a sudden disappear, and they're trying to put the blame on Yufa. The protagonist and Yufa break into the back of the church and find Hyperic's journal and learn he has gone to Mount Volcano and taken the others with him. So you and the team go after him. You have now saved the sick and are able to take them back to their home and their families, and Yufa is cleared. After talking to Yufa, she also shares her true feelings for you. I try to play it off like I'm not interested in her, but this dialogue doesn't seem to work in my favor. So Yufa is the one that sees you maybe as more than a friend. This is the closest we get to a romance since there's no one else that you can romance in this game, unlike past Atlus games. NieR is. You come across an old journal of someone NieR knew, and it contains information on relics. These relics Gallica is able to detect when entering the dungeon. For his story, you're just collecting more and more of these relics, trying to understand what they are. Eventually someone does steal them and try to win the favor of Luis, and you have to get them back. And once you get them back, NieR shares with you that these relics form a weapon of mass destruction, and asks you on what to do with them. Realistically, no matter what you said, NieR was going to destroy them. His goal in life is to continue on with wanting to create more for the world. And finally, Basilio. He is dealing with the loss of Del, and trying to figure out what to do with his life. You go with him to Brilehaven to get some medicine for the pain that he's dealing with. We run into an old friend of his named Vinca. Vinca knew Basilio and Fidelio from the days that they were in the experiment facility. Vinca is dealing with chest pains, and just tells Basilio that that it was from sleeping wrong. Later, you learn that the three of them were all in the same place called the Igniter Development Facility. You also happen to hear about the murders that are happening in the city. Basilio had tried to join the army, but they said that he was too young. But instead, they asked him to go help with the development of igniters. At that place, you got a room and a board, and you made slave wages. Finally, one day, Fidelio decided it was time for them to escape, and so they did, and they ran and made it all the way to the church and met Saint Rilla. Vinca wants Basilio and your help on a job. When you find out what the job is, it turns out that Vinca needs assistance killing a man for selling igniters on the black market. Turns out that he's been the one that's been killing people. Now Basilio has to make a choice on what to do. I thought it was impressive seeing his character growth here. He talks about how he used to have Fidelio tell him what to do, and he starts to ask you, but then he stops himself. This was something he has to answer for himself. And unfortunately, you have to stop Vinca, and you defeat him in battle, and in his last breath, he tells Basilio, thank you for your help, and that he is sorry. Basilio will continue to fight to stop Luis, because he wants to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Now, going back to the main story. As you're the only ones who can fly up to the palace with your Skyrunner, you and your friends make it to the palace. The palace is just in chaos now. There is tons of Magla and humans everywhere. It is more than likely the anxieties of the people of the country. You have to go and find whatever it is that's driving the people mad. When you start to get closer to the throne room, you are stopped by Magla. You hear the people's fears and anxieties. It's like an enormous weight that just dropped on you. You hear Luis speaking to you, and his logic is of course nothing but convenient for him and annoying for you. They tell him he is stopping them from proceeding to the throne room. He says, but I'm not stopping you. If you can't proceed, then you have failed. Which, I'm just gonna say this now, he uses this a lot, and it is annoying to hear. So now there are more challenges to get through, but nothing too crazy. The palace is just a bigger area with more monsters to fight and push through. You come across a room that a monster is protecting some statue, it seems. So you have to deal with this monster first. And you see this statue that looks like a dragon. Hulkenberg explains it's called the King's Servant, but even she doesn't understand why it glows now. You can see the magla gushing out of the crystal that the statue is holding. So now we need to break this crystal. Once you do, you hear something. You hear voices coming from Martira. The people seem to be coming to their senses. Barden explains to the people that they have been swallowed by their anxieties, and once they let that happen, they see a villain that doesn't exist. Barden encourages the people to move a step forward, even if it's scary, we can do it together. And now you have more support again on your side. It seems that destroying these statues brings people back to their senses. With the people now supporting you, the path is clear. There is a total of 4 statues, but before you press on, you see a vision of the king. You see a vision of the king struggling with his grief. He is giving up and letting Forden do what he wants to do. No one else is able to see this vision, and after discussing that we may be seeing the king's anxieties, you have to move on. You have to stop Luis. You will continue to be blocked off, and will have to continue to face different puzzles and challenges to destroy those crystals. The team realizes that these monsters may have been Luis's men turned into monsters because of all the melancholia. You destroy the next crystal, and it's the same thing. The magla is clearing, and you start to hear the people's voices again. This time it is Yufa's people back at Eht Ria. Adeni is speaking on your behalf to get the people on your side. There's still one more crystal on this floor, so you go find it and destroy it. You make it to the room where the crystal is, and take out the monster that's guarding it. You destroy the last one, and we hear voices again. This time it is some of the former candidates. They are telling the people that if you are joining Luis's side out of fear, to not worry. You have other candidates there to help as well. And then you gain more supporters again. The path clears, and yet again you see another vision of the former king. This time it is Forden and the king. They are discussing the closure of the Mage Academy. Forden wants to shut it down because of the fact that they study dragons allegedly in secret. With the rise of the magic igniters, all this theoretical study of magic will soon be obsolete according to Forden, and the king allows him to close the academy. You go to the next room, and it is the room where the prince was attacked, where it all started. They are having a conversation about how this is now a battle for the future, and the moment is interrupted by Zorba showing himself, and we see he is transformed into a human, and Luis did this to him. I have to make a comment here that I noticed with his arm. It looks like the hand is holding another hand. The fingers are interlinked, but looking at Zorba, it confirms that no matter the tribe, Luis can turn them human. Zorba says that in Luis's world, strength is the ultimate judge of all. Nothing else matters. It's freedom and fairness. Zorba is insane, and now you have to fight him. This time he doesn't have any weakness to light, but he still isn't too crazy of a fight, especially if you have the prince that does more damage to humans. After the fight, Zorba asks, why does this world keep rejecting him? Zorba is the only one who truly understands what Luis is fighting for and didn't care. Zorba is willing to be a stepping stone for Luis's new world, a world of equality where only the chosen may live, and he falls out of the palace. Basilio talks about him and his brother didn't know what to do with Zorba, always yelling and whatnot at the smallest things. Basilio's thinking back on it makes him wonder if these outbursts were just cries for help, which which could very well be true, to be honest. He said at the beginning of the fight, the world rejects him. He is Clamara and Mustari. It's the same for the protagonist. He is Clamar and Elda, the high class mixed with the lesser tribe. It must have been a rough life for Zorba. But with what Zorba mentioned, it raises the question on what Luis's true goals are. What does he mean by the chosen few will survive? But no matter what, you have to move on to the last crystal with Zorba gone. You destroy the last crystal, and this time you hear the voices coming from the capital. It is the voices of the people who have discovered Zorba's body. Batlin is telling the people that Luis has lied to everyone. They realize that the prince being turned into a monster was a lie, and he really is the prince. Batlin points out that Zorba was Luis's most loyal soldier. Luis is creating these monsters and giving them orders, and he will turn anyone he wants into these monsters. The people are giving a more reasonable reaction right now, and with this, you have moved up in the ranks and back into second place. You can now go to the throne room and face Luis. On the way to the throne room, you also find Luis's horns and confirm that he is Elda. You make it to the throne room and Luis is sitting on the throne. One of the things Luis says is he never lied, which, okay, in a way, I did the same thing in my choices to him. I never lied in my answers. Well, except telling Luis I wanted to serve him, but I never gave the full answer. And Luis does the same thing. Look at when he said you were a human monster. He doesn't share the fact that anyone can be transformed into a human monster. Luis also explains that the royal scepter drew magla from the masses. The royal scepter is a divine relic that absorbs magla from the people across the kingdom, making it basically have unlimited power. Luis says that the people have to direct their anxieties to the king to stay sane. He says what happened to the people was that the magla that spew from their hearts was greater than the scepter could absorb, which is why there was that stagnation. Luis shares with you now his plan. Once the king's magic ends on the day of the hero, he will take the royal scepter and all the magla gathered over these months and will restore it back to the people, basically turning the people into humans. He says the ones that can overcome it will be reborn as new humans, creating a natural selection. His idea of a world that is fair and just. Hulkenberg points out the delusions in this idea, but Luis points out that his idea worked. Look at the prince, for example. Luis's logic is those who follow him and accept his rule will surely survive by virtue of their own will, but if they give into their fear, yes, they will lose both form and mind. He says this is what it means to protect those who will follow. It is not a salvation given by empty charity, but earned through the providence of power. Luis never wanted the throne. This ideal of protection isn't protecting anyone, because like what he said before, the weak will get left behind, even if they dedicate their allegiances to Luis. Luis thinks that you and your friends would survive this and move on to the new world. He gives you an offer to join him. You and Luis take inspiration from the same book, which is crazy also to look at how they interpreted that book very differently. He tries to tell you that you both seek the same thing, that you both seek to destroy, and you can correct him by saying that you don't seek to destroy this world or any other. Luis talks about how his solution does have cruelty, but the fairness it would restore to their lives are worth any sacrifice, which you respond with, that's a false fairness. Basilio comes in speaking the truth. He points out that in Luis's world, he believes that some people deserve to die, and that makes him no better than Forden, and that does not sit well with Luis. Luis then casts a spell, and he takes the royal scepter. He says he will go up to his perch and watch the world collapse. He says, if you have the strength to weather this storm and come to him, he will deem you worthy opponent. Using that same bitch-ass excuse, he disappears into the magla storm. In the current state, you cannot get to him. The king then speaks to you all. He explains that he didn't have the power to fulfill his ideals, so he ensured his life would serve as key to activate the royal magic. Should any other person who wanted to destroy his regime, should Luis or anyone else take his life, that would be the catalyst. He really did want the throne to be passed on to whoever the people elected of their own will. In the meantime, you will go back to the capital to come up with a strategy. Now, really quick note here, when Luis asks you to join him, you can actually accept and get another bad ending here. You will join him and together the people of the world are turned into humans. Back to the main story, the only thing they can do is armor up the Skyrunner and dive right into it. It may be a one-way ride, but you don't have a choice in the matter. The safest day to do it will probably be the last day of the hero. That will be when the magla storm will be at the weakest. They're also still not sure what Luis's intentions are. Like, there's still more to his plan that he hasn't revealed. What is his motivation? But now you have some time to finish up any last-minute missions you need to do. One of these last-minute missions you can complete is the different trials of dragons. There are dragons at each of the towers that you will have to fight. These are not exactly easy challenges to face, but you do receive some nice weapons and armors that nullify fire attacks. After you defeat 3 dragons, it unlocks something at the Dragon Temple, the last dragon that is part of the trial. The final dragon, though, takes on the form of you and your abilities. It is actually able to switch between all the different archetypes you've unlocked. After this fight, you learn a little bit about the royal scepter and how it was originally created with the legendary weapons. dragons. On New Game Plus, there is actually a secret boss that is the Red Scale Dragon of Apocalypse. This dragon can be found in Academia with more, and it is definitely not an easy fight. This dragon, once you get him down to half his health, you basically have to give him 0 opportunities to attack you, because he will one-shot you at this point. And I was down to my last turn, and I was so nervous I wasn't gonna kill him, but I got so lucky. I almost peed my pants. Moore also explains that this book is the Book of Apocalypse, and it was written to destroy the world. He believes dragons were originally ancient weapons dangerous enough to end all things. In fact, he believes they have destroyed the world once before already. The dragons you now find throughout the land are survivors from that time. This specific book, though, has never been used. Moore explains that the dragons we have seen may have lost some of their power over the years, but this red dragon retained its perfect form. It was the deadliest weapon of all and brought the world to ruin in the War of Destruction. And we beat it. Barely, but when you do beat it, you get really powerful items. One of them gives you full health and MP at the end of every battle. The other one nullifies all affinities, which can help you in this final battle. The night before you take off to confront Luis, you go talk to all your friends that you've made throughout this adventure. The short version of these conversations is you're reminiscing on what happened in this game, and your friends will continue to support you with this fight, with Luis and beyond that. Some of them, like Brigitte for example, share with you their hopes and dreams for the future. Yufa takes you back to the village and she wants to give you something, and her brother is being overprotective big brother. Even though no matter what I tried, it seems like I can't avoid romancing her. For Heisme, he has put his son's remains in a necklace and will keep it close to his heart while he travels. Katharina wants to go exploring other countries and wants to help inform you on the world outside of Uchronia. This way you can both at least try to solve the world's problems. Today is the final day to face Luis. Where they are going is not really a place, just pure magla in the control of Luis. They call this place the Tyrant Star. If the sun proclaims the day and the moon has the night, then the celestial lord of these red skies, ill with anxiety, is the Tyrant Star. And you and the team make it. NieR is going to try and repair the Gauntlet Runner because as of right now, there's no way to escape from this place. This place is actually not that big. And also sadly, it is the best place to farm XP. Annoying thing that it is, this is the last place in the game and there's no way to return. The other thing with this place is there are platforms to take you to different locations. Now with this, it's time to discuss a different route you could take with this final battle. If you take these platforms, it will take you to an area with Melancholia crystals. The thing is, you have to fight human monsters that look very familiar. They are all human creatures that you fought in the past. They will have the same weaknesses too. And after you destroy them, you destroy the crystal. Yufa notices it's the same as the crystal from the statues in the royal palace. They think these crystals are feeding Luis's power. If you destroy the crystals, you will have weakened Luis. And also, you will receive weapons from the crystals as well. Yufa thinks that these weapons were within the royal scepter, which makes sense since we learned from the dragon trials that the royal scepter was made from the hero king's weapons. So doing this is 2 birds with 1 stone situation. You're gaining power while Luis is losing power. Basically, every crystal will give you a weapon for each archetype. Now you can actually not do this either. You can pull a Goku and choose to fight Luis at full strength. Doing this will also give you a couple of trophies as well if you're going for the 100%. Either choice does not change the outcome of the finale. It is only if you're going for the trophies or wanting an easier battle or just a little bit more of a challenge. It is finally time to confront Luis. He admits that he is not interested in revenge. He hated the fact that the Elda kept to themselves, hidden and locked away. And then one day he saw the king come to the village. He accepted the truth of the Elda people and the history of the world. After seeing the king, he wanted to leave the village. Then the Elda Sanctum was destroyed by Forden. It wasn't because of hatred or any crime committed by either side. It was pure injustice, a selfish act of devastation. It was a sight that burned into Luis's mind. He never wanted to let it happen again. So in his mind, he chooses to make a land of eternal, perfect equality, even should it cost him his life. He will send the anxieties of the people back to them. To burden others with your own fears and responsibility is cowardice. He wants to use the royal magic to craft a world where they cannot be. He says it's cowardice, but that is also a lonely way to see things. Stroll points out that it would become a nation that is blind to evil. It would just be a land of monsters, not people. And also, if you think back to Barden's story, and even Katarina's, and some of the other characters, they talk about changing things to work together, not just burden one person with everyone's fears and anxieties. Since he has the power of the royal scepter, he too is able to use the power of kings. He's using the power of the archetypes. His fight is consistently trying to stop him from charging up whatever it is that he's charging up and attacking you. After you beat him, naturally, he will not go down that easy. He's not done with this fight. He makes his escape onto his runner. You run back to NieR's to see if you can go after him. He was saving the reserve power for the trip home, but they have to go after him. As they're getting ready to board, there are tons of human monsters coming after them. The runner can't take off that quickly, so Stroll and the others will buy time while you and NieR take off. Then we get a cool animated cutscene of all of them holding off the monsters. Then all of a sudden we see Luis's Skyrunner begin to charge its cannons at your Skyrunner. So Stroll, Basilio, and Heismate go after it to stop it. We also see a nice moment of Heismate admitting he doesn't understand Parapus and never will, but he doesn't hate Basilio. The three of them transform and more beasts come flying at them. And we see Heismate and Basilio throw Stroll to stop the cannons. And in the explosion, we see him just falling, what looks like to be his death. Then we're back to the girls still fighting as well, surrounded by monsters. NieR tells you to take cover in the back, and if we live through this, we will meet again. And he charges a Skyrunner straight into Luis's runner. We are seeing them all sacrifice themselves for this final battle. It is now just you and Luis. Luis will not give up the royal scepter and asks you what it is you truly want. And I said to stop him. I thought what Gallica said here was very true. Luis has given up on dreams, given up on things that are, yes, going to be complicated and slow to change, which in turn shows he's given up on the world itself. Luis transforms once again, and then he does it again. He casts the royal scepter to transform you back into a human. You continue to resist as much as possible, and this came as a shock. You rip your own heart out and crushes it, ultimately dying. With this, it looks like Luis has won. More than summons you back to Academia, he summoned you just before you died. More explains that where this place is between reality and fantasy, a place that exists between dream and reality, mind and matter. Oh, wait, wrong game. He explains that the world we've been living in is a fantasy. The journey was an illusion. He says there's nothing but despair in that world, and it will never get better. It's endless, painful, irredeemable hell. More thought that it was possible to create a utopia. He then reveals to you the utopia world he created in his novel. Interesting thing you'll notice right away, it looks like our reality. I thought it was clever on the writer's part. More wants you to admit that everything you've been through has been nothing but just a story, just a fantasy. Then this can be your perfect reality. More thinks the other world, no one really wants change. The people just want someone for their infinite anxieties. You will then choose to agree with more or not accept it. You start to hear your friends' voices the more you deny it. You do not believe more. This world isn't real. It is similar to Rella's ideas as well, going back to that inspiration of childhood's ends we've seen in other works as well, but I deny this world of utopia. More is trying not to let you die. He doesn't want to lose anything else. He remembers who he is. He lost everything he loved. Academia, the woman he loved, and even his child. He had also hoped for death. Turns out, More is the former king, your father. He was also born of the same magic that split the prince. He once believed he could end the discrimination, but the despair of losing everyone, he couldn't bear it. But he asks you if you really want to leave, even though he is dying in reality, and More wants to stop you, and you have to fight him, but it isn't too crazy of a fight. More when he lost the love of his life. That is when he gave up on his ideals. You can continue to fight him to go back to reality because you do not want to give up. After you beat him, he asks you what drives you. You are determined by his beliefs and will not give up. More realizes that he is trying to be a true king of mind and body, and his friends' voices reach him. Your friends help you get through these challenges of reality, and you are determined to try to make these changes. Before you leave, he entrusts you with the power of his life. His father gives his life to you so you may live a life and go fight Luis. You wake up to all your friends. NieR ended up saving everyone mid-flight with a broken gauntlet runner. It is time to fight Luis again. He appears before you, and Luis wonders why you won't give up, and everyone shares why. They admit some of the things Luis said isn't wrong, but the problem is Luis gave up on the world, and he doesn't believe in the future. He doesn't want to see injustice happen ever again, and then we see him transform once more. He has turned into a human. This final battle is pretty crazy looking at his design. You see he has each of the different tribes on a cross. At some point in this battle, he thinks that people need to sacrifice themselves, and you see one of the tribe members he had attached to his body come out of his mouth. You'll have to destroy that puppet before he unleashes his power on you. Each of those faces have different emotions as well. There is the Mask of Ear, Mask of Joy, and Mask of Mirth. After you defeat this form, naturally, there is one last form that you have to defeat. So this form changes, but we see different eyes of all the different tribes on his wings. It's like the first form was the masks that Luis wore, and now we're starting to see him. His magla is going out of control, and he's losing his sanity. He is losing to his own anxieties, and by his own logic, we have to put him down. This fight is annoying with how many turns he gives himself, and how he affects your team with all the ailments he can add to your party. Also, if you're fighting him at full power, he uses abilities where he picks which tribe lives and dies. In my case, I think it's because Juna used the most abilities on him that either boosted my party or debuffed Luis. He kept targeting her and instantly killing her. He never really attacked anyone else in my party. Also in this fight, you get the synthesis attack called Armageddon's Final Sire. It deals 9,999 damage to all enemies. The challenge with that attack attack is it takes a lot of MP and takes 3 turn icons. After you defeat him, the sky clears up and you've done it. And even on the king's face, you can see now that you are in first place. But no surprise, Luis isn't done yet. He tries for one last strike, but you and your friends will not give up. Like Heisme says, show him the fall of his world. They encourage you to stop following the other kings and make your own path. Then all of a sudden there's a light that comes from the king's rock, and you and the gauntlet runner transform. Fantasy is more than an empty dream. It's a dream with the power to change the world. And we see this new archetype, the king, and you take Luis out once and for all, and the royal scepter is destroyed as well. We see more once more, and he sees now that the fantasy has become a force that frees people from their anxiety. Then we see more transform into the king. His duty draws to a close. Then we hear that voice talking to the king. It turns out that voice has been guiding you the entire time was actually the protagonist's mother. So by his side, he had his parents guiding him this entire time. His mother casts a final spell to abandon her body and survive in soul. She became an immaterial being among the fairies. She also explains that the power of the archetypes, everyone has the power to awaken to it. Anyone who has the will to change the world can awaken to it, which we saw that in fact throughout the game. All of the characters being able to use the different archetypes. The people no longer need some mystic relic or lofty magics to soothe their fears. They have found the strength to overcome it within. They are able to turn their anxiety into strength. They have a path to move forward. The royal magic now announces the new king. The protagonist has won. Of course, there are people in the crowd that do not accept it. They said it should be Luis, but he is dead, so good luck with that one. It's time for the coronation, and the king even says that he has a lot to learn. He believes we can make those changes together. He knows there will be times that he lets people down. Only results can prove his intent. But even should you oppose your king, you can always believe in your own future. He promises that. And now you are the king. 1 year later, you see some changes that have been done. The protagonist apparently likes to walk around amongst the people. He gets to hear everyone's honest opinions. Juna has now become leader of the Mage Academy that has just reopened. Heisme now has become a leader of the Royal Knights and separated them from the church. Hulkenberg is lady captain of the Royal Knights. Basilio's become captain of the Tredean Brigade. Walking around the city, you'll notice that there are less corpses lying around as well. You will even find some of Luis's soldiers you fought walking around. Some of them left after Luis killed Fidelio. Yufa has become chief magistrate. She explains that nowadays, when people are accused of a crime, they can give their side of the story now. Unlike before where we saw where they were hung without trial. Brigida has now become Igniter Consortium and manages all distribution of igniters. Weapons will not disappear overnight, but they can at least lower the number of them out there in the world. That is Brigida's goal. NieR still plans on creating more inventions that will help make people's lives easier. Stroll has now become general and still remains a lord as well. Outside of the walls of the capital, it's still rough out there. There are still humans and melancholia around the world. With that, the king decides to go on another adventure. He doesn't want to just sit on the throne, and he wants to do more for his people. And Hulkenberg and Stroll will also tag along with you. It isn't the best idea for the others to join you on this new adventure and leave the kingdom by itself, so they decide it'll just be the 4 of them again, and you set off on your adventure. In this final cutscene of them taking off on their journey, the rest of your friends join you too. Just this time, you also bring Maria as well. Man, this video was long. And with that, it is the end of the game. Fantasy lives on. This game was an amazing game, had a great story to tell. I'd expect nothing less from the people who worked on this game. I hope that Atlus does keep this as a new pillar in their game libraries. This game took 8 years to make, and it was worth the wait. The beautiful animation, the voice acting, the thought into the world around them. I know Yoko Taro made jokes that he was concerned about this game ruining the NieR franchise, but I think the NieR series is not going anywhere anytime soon. Both of these creators have a fan base that will play anything that they work on. I think my only major complaint was not having the ability to change out the archetypes mid-battle, but I think that is because of the years of being able to do that in Persona. But because of the fact that you can modify your abilities however you see fit anytime, it made it not so bad. And anyone who was in my Discord server would have seen my reaction to the Game Awards. You're telling me Astrobots beat Metaphor in Best Game Direction and Game of the Year? That's some bullshit there. Even if it wasn't Metaphor, I would have been okay with Elden Ring or Final Fantasy, but whatever. I'll get over it eventually. What were all your thoughts on this game? Did you like it? Love it? Hate it? Let me know in the comments. Also, I will provide a link in my description to my Discord channel if you would like to join. My next projects I'm working on are videos on Stellar Blade and even more of the Persona series and Shin Megami Tensei. So hope you look forward to those videos. Thank you again for your continued support, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.